I walked out of the attorney's office clutching a check for $1.2 million and the deed to a massive ranch in Montana. I drove home with a bottle of champagne on the passenger seat, tears of gratitude streaming down my face, believing that this money would finally save my family and make my wife love me again. I stood on the other side of my kitchen door ready to announce that our struggles were over, but then I heard my daughter-in-law Emily speak. "We cannot wait for the old man to die of natural causes. Tyrell does not have that kind of time." I froze. My hand hovered over the doorknob. Then my wife Viola answered, her voice colder than I had ever heard it. "You are right, he is useless to us now anyway. Sell the house and dump him in the state facility by Monday." My heart did not break in that moment, it calcified into stone. I slid the check back into my inside pocket and stepped away from the door. Before I continue this story of how I turned the tables on the people who tried to destroy me, please let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to protect yourself from the very people who were supposed to love you. My name is Roland Hayes. I am 68 years old. For 40 years, I worked in logistics, managing warehouses and breaking my back on concrete floors to ensure my family never went hungry. I am a simple man. I value hard work, loyalty, and the quiet dignity of providing for your own. I thought I had built a life of respect. I thought I had raised a son who understood the value of a dollar and the importance of blood. I was wrong. The day my life changed began in the dim, dust-mote-filled office of Mr. O'Malley. He was an old Irish attorney who smelled of pipe tobacco and peppermint. He had been the personal lawyer for my older brother, Bernie. Bernie and I had not spoken in 20 years. Not because of a fight, but because life took us in different directions. Bernie went west to Montana to chase land and oil, and I stayed here in Chicago to raise a family and care for our ailing parents. I thought Bernie had forgotten me. Mr. O'Malley slid a thick envelope across the mahogany desk. I hesitated to touch it. My hands, calloused and scarred from decades of lifting crates, looked out of place against the polished wood. O'Malley took off his glasses and looked at me with eyes that had seen too much of human greed. "Roland, your brother passed away 3 weeks ago," he said softly. I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. I knew that. I had received the notification, but there was no funeral. Bernie had requested immediate cremation and scattering over his land. He was a solitary man. O'Malley continued. "Bernie never married. He had no children. He watched you from afar, Roland. He knew you struggled. He knew you took care of Mom and Pop until the end while he was out building his empire. He admired you." I looked down at my worn boots. I did not feel admirable. I felt tired. I was retired, living on a pension that barely covered the utilities in a house that needed a new roof, with a wife who looked at me with disappointment every single morning. O'Malley opened the folder. "Bernie left everything to you, Roland, all of it." I blinked, not understanding. "What is everything?" I asked. O'Malley smiled a thin, tight smile. "The Blackwood Ranch in Montana. 4,000 acres of prime land sitting on top of a significant shale gas deposit, and his liquid assets. After taxes and fees, the cash inheritance comes to $1,200,000. The room stopped spinning. The silence was deafening. 1.2 million. It was a number I could not comprehend. It was freedom. It was security. It was the end of eating discounted tuna fish and worrying about the heating bill. O'Malley pushed the check toward me. "There is one condition, Roland. Bernie was very specific about this. The assets are solely in your name. He stipulated that this is a separate inheritance, not marital property. He knew about Viola. He knew she liked to spend. He wanted to make sure you were the one in control." I took the check. My fingers trembled as I touched the paper. I signed the documents, my signature shaky but legible. I walked out of that office feeling 10 feet tall. The heavy gray sky of Chicago looked bright to me. The biting wind felt like a breeze. I was not just Roland, the retired warehouse manager, anymore. I was Roland Hayes, the owner of Blackwood Ranch. I was a millionaire. I got into my truck, a Ford F-150 that had seen better decades. The engine rattled when I started it, a sound that usually annoyed me, but today it sounded like music. I drove toward the liquor store on 5th Avenue. I bought a bottle of champagne. It was not the expensive French kind, just a $20 bottle of sparkling wine, but it was the best I had bought in years. I stopped at the grocery store and bought a bouquet of red carnations. Viola loved roses, but carnations were what I could usually afford. Today I had $1 million in my pocket, but old habits die hard. I would buy her a greenhouse full of roses tomorrow. Today, I just wanted to get home. I drove through the streets of our neighborhood. It was a decent area, working class, mostly African American families who had been here for generations. I looked at the houses, thinking about how I could fix up our porch, maybe repaint the siding. I thought about my son Tyrell. He was 35 and still trying to find himself. He called himself an entrepreneur, but mostly he just borrowed money from me for schemes that never paid off. He had married Emily 3 years ago. Emily was white, a real estate agent who always looked at our home as if she were appraising it for demolition. She was sharp, ambitious, and I always felt she looked down on us, on me. But today, I forgave them all. I had enough money to help Tyrell start a real business. I could help Emily get her own broker license. I could take Viola on that cruise she had been talking about for 20 years. I pulled into the driveway. My house stood there, a 2-story structure with peeling white paint and a lawn that needed mowing. It looked like a palace to me because I finally had the means to make it shine. I grabbed the champagne and the flowers. I checked my reflection in the rearview mirror. Gray hair, deep lines etched into my dark skin eyes that usually looked weary. But today my eyes were bright. I looked alive. I walked up the porch steps, avoiding the loose board I had been meaning to fix. I unlocked the front door quietly. I wanted to surprise them. I knew Tyrell and Emily were coming over for dinner. Viola had been cooking a pot roast since noon. The smell of onions and slow-cooked beef hit me as I stepped into the foyer. It was the smell of home. I started to walk toward the kitchen, a smile plastered on my face. The flowers were crinkling in my grip. I was about to call out to shout, "Honey, I'm home and I'm rich," but then I heard the voices. They were low, intense, and coming from the kitchen. I stopped. Something in the tone made my stomach tighten. It was not the tone of a family preparing for a meal. It was the tone of conspirators. I stepped closer to the door, which was pushed almost shut, leaving only a sliver of light. I heard Emily first. Her voice was distinct, sharp, and nasal. "We are running out of options, Tyrell. The loan sharks are not going to wait another month. They threatened to come to my office. Do you know what that would do to my reputation? I cannot lose my license again." Tyrell's voice was a mumble, pathetic and weak. "I know, baby, I know. I asked him for $5,000 yesterday. He said he didn't have it. He's holding out on us. I swear he has money hidden away in that mattress." I stood frozen in the hallway. Tyrell had asked me for money yesterday. He told me it was for a car repair. Now I was hearing about loan sharks. My grip on the champagne bottle tightened. Then Emily spoke again, and her words were like ice water poured down my spine. "We cannot wait for the old man to die of natural causes, Tyrell. You do not have that kind of time, and honestly, neither do I. I am tired of coming to this dump and pretending to eat his dry roast beef. We need a permanent solution." I waited for Viola to defend me. I waited for my wife of 40 years, the woman I had nursed through breast cancer, the woman I had worked double shifts for so she could have nice clothes for church, to speak up. I waited for her to tell Emily to get out of her house. Viola spoke. Viola. But she did not defend me. Her voice was flat, devoid of any warmth. "He is useless to us now anyway. All he does is sit in that chair and watches old westerns. He forgets to turn off the lights. He tracks mud in from the garden. He is just a burden, Tyrell." My knees nearly gave out. A burden. Is that what I was? Just a burden who paid the mortgage? Just a burden. Who paid for the groceries they were eating right now? Emily pressed on, sensing her advantage. "Look, I have a friend who works administration at the Sunnyvale State Facility. It is not the Ritz, but it is secure. If we can get a doctor to sign off on dementia, we can have him committed involuntarily. Once he is declared incompetent, you get power of attorney, Viola. You can liquidate the house. Liquidate the house. My house. The house my father bought in 1965. The house I had fought to keep during the recession." Tyrell sounded hesitant, but not because of morality, only because of fear. "But he isn't crazy, Emily. He's sharp. He remembers every baseball stat from 1980. How are we going to get a doctor to sign off on that?" Emily laughed, a cruel, short sound. "That is where my friend Dr. Vance comes in. He lost his license in Ohio, but he is practicing here under the radar. He owes me a favor. For $5,000 from the sale of the house, he will sign anything we put in front of him. We just need to help the symptoms along a little bit." Help the symptoms along. I did not understand what that meant at first. Then Viola clarified it for me. "I have his blood pressure medication," she said casually. "If we mix it with those sleeping pills you have Tyrell and maybe hide his glasses, confuse him a bit. He will look bewildered enough when Vance comes to examine him. We can say he has been aggressive. That gets him processed faster. I leaned against the wall, the champagne bottle heavy as a lead weight in my hand. They were plotting to drug me. They were plotting to frame me as insane. They were plotting to lock me away in a state facility, a place where old people went to rot in urine-soaked sheets just so they could sell my house to pay off Tyrell's gambling debts. My son, my wife, my daughter-in-law. The shock washed over me cold and numbing. I looked down at the flowers in my hand. The red carnations looked like bloodstains against the white wrapping paper. I felt a surge of nausea. I wanted to kick the door open. I wanted to scream. I wanted to wave the check in their faces and tell them they had just lost $1 million. I wanted to see the look on Emily's face when she realized she had thrown away a fortune. But I stopped myself. I had spent 40 years working in warehouses. I knew how to count inventory. I knew how to spot a loss. And I knew that if I walked in there now shouting and emotional, they would just accelerate their plan. They would say I was having a violent episode. They would call the police. They would use my anger as proof of my dementia. I was a black man in America shouting at a white woman. I knew exactly how that would look if the police arrived. I had to be smarter. I had to be cold. Bernie had left me this money because he respected me. He left it to me separately because he knew. He saw what I refused to see. He saw that I was surrounded by leeches. I slowly backed away from the kitchen door. My floorboards creaked, but the sound of their own plotting covered my retreat. I went back to the front door. I opened it and stepped out onto the porch. I closed it again this time with a little more force, letting the latch click loudly. I took a deep breath of the evening air. I composed my face. I hid the pain, the betrayal, the absolute devastation that was raging inside my chest. I took the check from my pocket and slid it deep into the hidden lining of my work jacket. I left the champagne and the flowers in the truck bed covered by an old tarp. They did not deserve a celebration. They deserved a war, and I was going to give them one. I walked back into the house, calling out in a voice that sounded weary and old, exactly the way they wanted me to sound. "Hello? Is anyone home?" I forgot my keys again. The whispering in the kitchen stopped instantly. I heard the scraping of chairs. I walked into the kitchen, dragging my left leg, slightly adding a frailty to my step that wasn't there an hour ago. Viola was standing by the stove, stirring the pot. She turned to me, a fake smile plastered on her face. "Hey, old man, you are late. We were getting worried you got lost." Tyrell was sitting at the table, looking at his phone, refusing to meet my eyes. Emily was pouring wine into a glass, her eyes scanning me with a predatory sharpness. "Hi, Roland," she said. "You look tired. Are you feeling okay? You look a little confused." I looked at them. I looked at the three people who were my entire world, and I saw them for the first time as strangers, enemies. I sat down at the head of the table, the chair groaning under my weight. "I am fine," I said, keeping my voice steady. "Just a long day. I felt a little dizzy driving home. Maybe my blood pressure is acting up." Emily exchanged a quick glance with Viola, a look of triumph. I saw it. I saw the trap snap shut in their minds. They thought I was playing right into their hands. They thought the victim was cooperating. I let them believe it. I accepted the plate of roast beef Viola set in front of me. I ate the food prepared by the woman who planned to poison me. And with every bite I made a plan. I would not just survive this. I would destroy them. I would let them think they were winning right up until the moment I pulled the rug out from under their feet. I was Roland Hayes. I was the owner of Blackwood Ranch. And I was about to teach my family a lesson they would never forget. I dragged my left foot across the threshold of the front door, ensuring it scraped loudly against the wood. I hunched my shoulders forward, curving my spine just enough to lose 2 inches of height. I was no longer the strong man who had managed inventory for 40 years. I was the fragile, confused old burden they needed me to be. I saw Viola sitting in her favorite armchair in the living room. She did not get up. She did not smile. She looked at me over the top of her reading glasses with eyes that held the same affection one might have for a bag of trash that had been left out in the sun too long. "Where have you been, Roland?" she asked. Her voice was sweet. It was a sugary coating over a bitter pill. It was the voice she used when the pastor came to visit, or when she wanted something. But her eyes were cold. They scanned my empty hands, probably checking to see if I had brought groceries or money. I had brought neither. I only brought the secret of $1 million burning a hole in the lining of my jacket. I went to the free clinic over on 4th Street. I lied. My voice trembled just the right amount. I told you my hip was hurting. I thought maybe they could give me something for the pain without it costing too much. I saw a flicker of annoyance cross her face. She hated anything that reminded her we were struggling. She hated the idea of her husband sitting in a waiting room with people who had nothing, even though we were exactly those people. You should have told me, she said, turning a page of her magazine without looking at it. I was worried sick. You know how your memory is getting. I did not want you wandering off and getting lost. It was the first seed. She was planting it right there in the open. My memory was fine. I could remember the serial number of a forklift I drove in 1995. But I nodded. I looked down at the floor like a scolded child. I am sorry, Viola, I mumbled. I just wanted to help with the pain. Go wash up, she said, dismissing me with a wave of her hand. Emily and Tyrell are staying for dinner. Try not to make a mess in the bathroom this time. I walked down the hall listening to the rhythm of my own uneven steps. I went into the bathroom and locked the door. I turned on the faucet and splashed cold water on my face. I looked at myself in the mirror. The man looking back was angry. He was furious, but he was also focused. I dried my face with a towel that had a hole in the center. I took a deep breath. It was showtime. When I walked into the dining room, the table was set. It was the good china, the set we only used for Thanksgiving or when Viola wanted to impress someone. Tonight she wanted to impress Emily. My son Tyrell was already seated. He looked nervous. He was tapping his fork against the edge of the table, a habit he had since he was a boy. He did not look at me. He looked at the empty plate in front of him, as if it held the answers to his gambling debts. Emily walked in from the kitchen carrying a bottle of wine. She walked with the confidence of someone who owned the place. She was wearing a blazer and jeans, trying to look like the successful real estate agent she pretended to be. She held the bottle up like a trophy. "Look what I brought," she announced. "It is a vintage Cabernet. I have been saving it for a special occasion, but I thought tonight was perfect, since we are all together." I looked at the bottle as she set it down. She had peeled the price tag off, but she had not done a good job. There was a sticky residue left in the shape of a rectangle and a tiny corner of orange sticker that said, "Clearance," still clinging to the glass. It was a $5 bottle of wine she had probably picked up at the gas station on the way over. But Viola clapped her hands together. "Oh, Emily, you spoil us," she gushed. "That is too generous of you. I sat down at the head of the table. Usually I carved the roast, but tonight the platter was placed in front of Tyrell. Another subtle shift. Another way of saying I was no longer the man of the house. Emily poured the wine. She skipped my glass at first, then paused. "Oh, Roland, do you want some?" she asked, her tone implying that I probably should not have any. "It might interact with your medication." "I will have a small glass," I said quietly. She poured a meager amount, barely covering the bottom of the glass. We began to eat. The roast was dry and the potatoes were undercooked, but I ate methodically. I needed my strength. The conversation started with small talk about the weather and the neighbors. Then Emily cleared her throat. She set her fork down and looked at me with an expression of deep concern. It was a look that made my skin crawl. "Roland, we need to talk about something," she said. I looked up. "What is it?" I asked. She sighed. "It is about the water bill. It came today. It is triple what it usually is." I frowned. Triple. That did not make sense. I was the one who paid the bills. I knew exactly what the usage was. "Why is it so high?" I asked. Emily leaned forward. "Because you left the garden hose running again, Dad. Tyrell found it this afternoon when he pulled up. It had been running for hours, flooding the side yard. You must have turned it on to water those hydrangeas and just walked away." I stared at her. I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. I had not watered the hydrangeas today. I had not even been in the garden. I had been at the lawyer's office securing my future. I knew for a fact I had not touched that hose. But this was it. This was the gaslighting. They were inventing failures to build a case for my incompetence. "I did not touch the hose," I said firmly. "I was not in the garden today." Tyrell finally looked up. His eyes were watery and weak. "Dad, come on," he said. "I saw it. The water was gushing out. The yard is a swamp. Why do you have to lie about it? It is okay to forget. We just need to know so we can fix it." I looked at my son. He was lying to my face. He was lying to the man who taught him how to throw a baseball. He was lying to the man who sat up with him when he had fevers. He was collaborating in my destruction because he was too weak to stand up to his wife and his debts. Maybe I did, I said slowly, letting doubt creep into my voice. I do not remember doing it. But if you saw it, Tyrell, then I suppose I must have. Viola shook her head, clicking her tongue against her teeth. This is exactly what I was talking about, Roland, she said. First it was the stove last week. Now the water. You are becoming a danger to the house. What if it had been the gas? We could have all died in our sleep. I had not left the stove on last week either. I checked the knobs 3 times before bed every single night. It was a habit from my days in the warehouse securing the propane tanks, but I did not fight them. I let them have their victory. I let them think I was cracking. I looked down at my plate, pushing a piece of dry beef around with my fork. I am sorry, I whispered. I will try to be more careful. The tension at the table relaxed instantly. They exchanged looks. They were winning. The old man was accepting his decline. They ate with more gusto, now drinking the cheap wine as if it were nectar. I waited until they were comfortable. I waited until they thought I was beaten down. Then I decided to deploy my own weapon. I decided to test the depth of their greed. I cleared my throat. The sound was loud in the quiet room. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a handkerchief, dabbing at my mouth. I wanted to draw their attention. I wanted them looking at me. You know, I said, keeping my voice raspy. I was looking through some old boxes in the attic yesterday. I found something I had forgotten about. All chewing stopped. Viola looked at me. What did you find? She asked. I found an old savings bond, I said, from back when I started at the warehouse, and a little cash stash I had tucked inside an old Bible. I counted it up. It is about $5,000. The silence that followed was electric. It was the silence of predators smelling blood. $5,000 was nothing compared to the check in my jacket, but to them, in that moment, it was a lifeline. It was a month of payments to the loan shark. It was a new handbag. It was a temporary fix to their permanent failures. Tyrell put his fork down. 5,000, he repeated. His voice cracked. Are you sure, Dad? Where is it? It is in a safe place, I said. I was thinking I should go to the bank tomorrow and deposit it. It is a nice little nest egg. Maybe I can use it to fix the roof, or maybe take a trip down south to see my cousins. Tyrell looked at Emily. Her eyes were wide and hungry. She gave him a microscopic nod. Tyrell turned back to me. A smile spread across his face, but it looked painful, like a mask that did not fit. Dad, that is amazing, he said. That is really great news. You know, it is funny you mention that because I have this opportunity right now, a really incredible investment opportunity. Here it comes, I thought. The pitch. What kind of opportunity? I asked, feigning interest. It is in crypto, Tyrell said. His words rushed out, stumbling over each other. My friend has this new coin. It is about to explode, Dad. If we put that 5,000 in now, it could be 50,000 by next month. We could pay off the house. We could get you a new truck. It is a sure thing. I looked at him. I looked at the desperation etched into the lines around his mouth. He was 35 years old, and he still believed in magic money. He still believed there was a shortcut to dignity. I do not know, Tyrell, I said, scratching my head. I do not understand that digital money stuff. It sounds risky. I think I better keep it for a rainy day. Or maybe for my funeral costs, so your mother does not have to worry. Emily leaned in. Her voice was sharp. Roland, do not be selfish, she said. Tyrell is trying to build a future here. He is trying to help the family. That money is just sitting there doing nothing. If you invest it with him, you are helping everyone. Do you really need a trip down south? You barely have the energy to walk to the kitchen. The insult was direct. She was telling me I was already dead. She was telling me I had no right to enjoy the fruits of my own labor because I was expiring. I looked at Viola. What do you think? I asked. Should I give the boy the money? Viola took a sip of wine. She did not look at me. She looked at the centerpiece on the table. It is your money, Roland, she said coldly. But Tyrell is your son. If you cannot help your own son, what good are you? What good are you? The words hung in the air. That was it. That was the summary of my existence in their eyes. I was only as good as what they could extract from me. I took a slow breath. I let the silence stretch out until it was uncomfortable. I let them think I was considering it. I let them hope. Then I crushed it. No, I said. My voice was not loud, but it was final. No. I am not going to gamble it away on magic coins. I worked hard for that money. It stays with me. If I need a nursing home someday like you all keep saying, maybe I will need that money to pay for a decent one." The atmosphere in the room changed instantly. The temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. The hope in Tyrell's eyes vanished, replaced by a dark panic. He looked at Emily, terrified. He knew what the loan sharks would do if he did not come up with something. Emily's face hardened into a mask of pure hatred. Her eyes narrowed into slits. Under the table, I heard a thud. She had kicked Tyrell. It was a hard, vicious kick. I saw him wince. It was a signal. It meant diplomacy was over. It meant the time for asking was done. Now they would take. "Fine, Roland," Emily said. She stood up abruptly, her chair screeching against the floor. "Do what you want. It is your money. Keep it. Bury it in the backyard for all I care." She grabbed her plate and marched into the kitchen. Viola stood up too. "I have a headache," she announced. "I am going to lie down. You clean up Tyrell." They left the room. My son and I sat there in the wreckage of the dinner. He looked at me, and for a second, I thought I saw shame. I thought I saw a glimmer of the boy I used to carry on my shoulders. But then he looked away. He looked toward the kitchen where his wife was waiting. "You should have just given it to me, Dad," he whispered. "You really should have." He stood up and followed the women. I was left alone at the table. The cheap wine bottle sat in the center, mocking me. I reached into my jacket and touched the envelope with the check. I was a millionaire. I was rich beyond their wildest dreams, and I had never felt more alone in my entire life. I sat there for a long time, listening to the whispers starting up again in the other room. The tone had changed. It was no longer conspiratorial. It was urgent. It was angry. They were cornered now. I had denied them the easy way out. Now they would come for me with everything they had. The war had moved from the cold phase to the hot phase. I stood up and cleared my own plate. I washed it in the sink, drying it carefully. I walked to my bedroom and locked the door. I wedged a chair under the handle. I knew they would not let me sleep peacefully tonight. And I was right. The real nightmare was just beginning. The morning sun filtered through the blinds of my bedroom, but it brought no warmth to the cold pit in my stomach. I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the nightstand. To anyone else, it was just a table with a lamp and a bottle of pills. But to me, it was a crime scene. I spent 40 years managing logistics for a warehouse that supplied half of Chicago. My job was precision. My job was knowing exactly where a crate was placed and if it had been moved by even an inch. I knew my nightstand. I reached out but did not touch the bottle of blood pressure medication. I looked at the dust ring on the wood. The bottle was sitting exactly 2 centimeters to the left of the ring. I had placed it directly inside the ring last night before wedging the chair under my door. Someone had been in my room while I slept. The chair was still under the handle, but the lock on this door was old and easily picked with a hairpin. Viola knew how to do it. She used to do it when Tyrell was a baby and locked himself in. I picked up the bottle. The weight felt right, but the sound was wrong. The rattle was too sharp. I unscrewed the cap and poured a single pill into my calloused palm. My blood pressure medication was a distinct pale blue. This pill was blue, but it was the wrong shade. It was lighter, almost powdery. It looked like the generic sleeping pills Tyrell used when his guilty conscience kept him awake. They were not just trying to confuse me. They were trying to drug me. They wanted me lethargic and stumbling when Dr. Vance arrived. They wanted a zombie, not a man. My hand closed into a fist over the pill. I felt a surge of rage so hot it nearly blinded me. I wanted to storm into the kitchen and force this pill down Viola's throat. I wanted to ask her if 40 years of marriage meant so little that she would poison me like a rat in the basement, but I breathed in through my nose and out through my mouth. I controlled the rage. I had to be smarter. I had to be the ghost in my own house. I took a tissue from the box and wrapped the pill inside it, then tucked it deep into the pocket of my robe. I poured a glass of water from the carafe. I threw the water into the potted fern in the corner. Then I threw my head back and pretended to swallow gulping air loudly enough for anyone listening outside the door to hear. I set the glass down with a clatter. I got dressed slowly. I put on my work boots even though I had no work to go to. They made me feel grounded. I checked the hidden pocket in my jacket to make sure the check and the deed were still there. They were my armor. I unlocked the door and removed the chair. I walked out into the hallway, dragging my feet just a little, letting my shoulders slump. If they wanted a senile old man, I would give them an Oscar-worthy performance. But behind my clouded eyes, I was watching everything. I was recording every betrayal. I walked into the kitchen, and the smell of burnt toast hung in the air. Viola was standing by the sink. She did not look at me when I entered. She was too busy setting the stage for the next act of her play. There was a pot of vegetable soup boiling on the stove. It was strange because Viola never made soup for breakfast. She usually just had coffee and toast. "Good morning, Viola," I said, my voice raspy with sleep. She jumped as if she had not heard me coming. She turned around and her face was a mask of irritation. "You startled me, Roland," she snapped. "You are always creeping around like a ghost. Sit down. I made soup. You need to eat something soft. You had trouble chewing last night." I sat down. I had not had trouble chewing. The roast had been as tough as leather, but I nodded obediently. She ladled a bowl of hot soup and brought it over. As she placed it in front of me, her hand jerked. It was not a slip. It was a deliberate flick of the wrist. The bowl tipped. Hot orange liquid splashed all over the table and onto the linoleum floor. It missed me by inches, but the mess was catastrophic. "Oh my God, Roland," she screamed, jumping back. "Look what you did. You knocked it right out of my hand." I sat there motionless. My hands were in my lap. I had not touched her. I had not touched the bowl. But she was already creating the narrative. "I did not touch it, Viola," I said calmly. "You grabbed my wrist," she yelled, her voice shrill and carrying. "You are getting violent, Roland, just like with the water hose yesterday. You do not even know what you are doing anymore. Look at this mess." She grabbed a rag and started wiping the floor, aggressively muttering to herself. I watched her. I watched the woman I had loved since high school frame me for a spill she created. It was heartbreaking, but it was also clarifying. There was no love left here, only strategy. Then she stood up and grabbed the wall phone. She dialed a number I knew well. It was Mrs. Johnson, the neighborhood gossip. If you wanted the whole block to know something, you told Mrs. Johnson. "Hello, Beatrice," Viola said, her voice shifting instantly from anger to tearful exhaustion. "I am sorry to call so early. I just needed to hear a friendly voice. It is Roland. He is getting worse." "Yes." Just now he slapped a bowl of hot soup out of my hands. He got confused and aggressive. "I am scared, Beatrice. I do not know how much longer I can handle him here. He needs professional care." I sat there and listened to her destroy my reputation. I listened to her paint me as a violent monster to the woman who lived 3 doors down. Mrs. Johnson would tell everyone at the grocery store. By noon, the whole neighborhood would be looking at me with pity and fear. I stood up. The chair scraped against the floor. Viola turned her back to me, whispering into the receiver. I walked out of the kitchen. I did not clean up the soup. If I was the villain they wanted, I would not clean up their messes. I walked to the front door and opened it. "Where do you think you are going?" she hissed, covering the mouthpiece. "I am going for a walk," I said, "to clear my head. Maybe the fresh air will stop me from being so aggressive." I slammed the door before she could answer. I walked down the street, feeling the eyes of the neighbors on me. I knew what they were thinking. Poor Viola, dealing with that crazy old man. Let them think it. The truth was coming, and when it arrived, it would be louder than any gossip Mrs. Johnson could spread. I walked 3 blocks to the main avenue and flagged down a taxi. I needed to get out of the neighborhood. I needed to go somewhere where nobody knew my name or the lies my wife was spreading. I told the driver to take me to the electronics store on the north side of the city. I had a specific shopping list, and I needed to pay in cash. The store was a massive warehouse of technology humming with the sound of televisions and computers. I felt out of place in my old work clothes, but I walked with purpose. I found the security section. I did not want a big system. I needed something invisible. I found what I was looking for on a bottom shelf. 2 spy cameras no bigger than a quarter. They were wireless and activated by motion. They recorded directly to a memory card and could be viewed on a phone app. I bought them along with a cheap burner smartphone. I did not want to install the app on my regular phone in case Tyrell decided to snoop through it while I was sleeping. I paid with bills I had stashed in my wallet from the lawyer's advance. The cashier looked at me, a young kid with piercings. He did not ask questions. He just bagged the items and went back to his phone. I took the taxi back but had him drop me off a block away. I slipped into the house through the back garden gate. The house was quiet. Viola's car was gone. She was probably out spreading more lies or meeting with Emily to strategize. It was the perfect opportunity. I worked quickly. My hands, which were supposedly too shaky to hold a soup bowl, were steady as a surgeon's. I placed the first camera in the living room, tucked high up on the bookshelf between 2 old encyclopedias. It had a perfect view of the entire room and the hallway leading to the bedrooms. The second camera went into my bedroom. I hid it inside the air vent cover, angling it down toward my nightstand and the dresser where I kept my few valuables. I synced them to the burner phone. The picture was crisp and clear. I felt a grim satisfaction. Now I had eyes. Now I was not just a victim, I was a witness. I hid the burner phone inside an old pair of winter boots in the back of my closet. Then I sat in my chair and waited. Viola came home an hour later. She ignored me. Tyrell and Emily arrived in the evening. They went straight to the kitchen, whispering. I stayed in my room claiming a headache. At midnight, when the house was finally silent, I retrieved the burner phone. I sat in the dark, the blue light of the screen illuminating my face. I scrolled through the footage from the afternoon. The video showed my bedroom. The timestamp was 2 p.m. The door opened and Emily walked in. She did not knock. She did not hesitate. She walked straight to my dresser. She began pulling open drawers, rifling through my socks and underwear. Her face was twisted in a scowl. She tossed my clothes onto the floor, showing zero respect for my property. She moved to the nightstand. She picked up my Bible and shook it, hoping cash would fall out. Nothing did. Then she spoke. Her voice was tinny on the recording, but clear enough. "Where is it, you old miser?" she hissed. "I know you have it. Nobody walks around this broke without a stash." She kicked the bed frame in frustration. "Damn it," she cursed. "We are running out of time. If we do not find that money before the first of the month, Tyrell is dead meat." I watched the video 3 times. I watched my daughter-in-law invade my sanctuary. I watched her hunt for my meager savings like a scavenger. I watched her confirm that my son was in deep trouble with dangerous people. I turned off the phone and hid it again. Then I took out my regular cell phone. I went into the bathroom and turned on the shower to mask my voice. I dialed Mr. O'Malley's personal number. He picked up on the second ring. "Roland, is everything all right?" he asked, his voice thick with sleep. "No," I said. "Nothing is all right. They are escalating. They changed my medication. They are trying to drug me to make me look incompetent. And I have video proof of them searching my room for money." There was a silence on the line. Then O'Malley spoke, his voice sharp and awake. "Roland, you need to get out of there. This is dangerous. If they are desperate enough to drug you, they might be desperate enough to do worse." "I cannot leave yet," I said. "Not until I have everything. Not until I can prove the conspiracy. If I leave now, they will spin it. They will say I wandered off. They will use it to get the guardianship. I need to catch them in the act of something undeniable." "Roland, listen to me," O'Malley said. "I can get a court order. I can protect your assets." "Protecting the assets is not enough," I interrupted. "I need to protect my name. I need to expose them for what they are. But I need you to do something for me. Lock down everything. Put the ranch and the cash into a blind trust immediately. Make sure that even if they forge my signature, they cannot touch a dime. And get a private investigator ready. I am going to need background checks on everyone, especially Emily." "Consider it done," O'Malley said. "But Roland, watch your back. These people are not your family anymore. They are predators." "I know," I said, looking at my face in the mirror. The eyes staring back were hard and cold. "I know exactly what they are, and they are about to find out exactly who I am." I hung up the phone. I turned off the shower. I walked back into my bedroom. I looked at the air vent where the camera was hiding. I laid down on the bed, but I did not close my eyes. I lay there in the dark, waiting for the next move in this deadly game of chess. I was a pawn no longer. I was the king, and I was ready to strike. The doorbell rang at 2 in the afternoon, shattering the tense silence that had filled the house since breakfast. I was sitting in my recliner, pretending to doze, while actually memorizing the serial numbers on the spine of a book across the room just to keep my mind sharp. Tyrell practically ran to the door. I heard hushed whispers in the entryway and the sound of a heavy handshake. When my son walked into the living room, he was guiding a stranger by the elbow. "Dad, wake up," Tyrell said, his voice too loud and too cheerful. "I have a surprise for you." An old friend of mine was in the neighborhood and wanted to say hello. I opened my eyes, slowly blinking as if waking from a deep sleep. I looked at the man standing next to my son. He was a short man with a receding hairline and a suit that looked like it had been slept in. His tie was stained and he smelled faintly of stale cigarette smoke and mints used to cover the smell of cheap whiskey. He carried a battered leather satchel that looked more like a prop than a medical bag. "This is Dr. Vance," Tyrell announced. "We went to high school together, Dad. Do you remember him? He used to come over to play basketball." I stared at the man. I had never seen him in my life. I knew every single one of Tyrell's high school friends. I knew the ones who stole from my liquor cabinet and the ones who actually did their homework. This man was at least 10 years older than Tyrell. He looked 50 if he was a day. It was a lazy lie born of desperation. "I do not recall you, son," I said, keeping my voice raspy. "But my memory is not what it used to be, I suppose." Vance smiled, revealing teeth that had seen too much coffee. "It has been a long time, Mr. Hayes," he said, his voice oily and smooth. "I heard you have been having some health issues. Tyrell here was telling me about your dizzy spells and the confusion. I thought since I was in the area I would just do a friendly checkup. Off the books, of course, just to give you peace of mind." He sat down on the sofa opposite me without waiting for an invitation. He placed his satchel on the coffee table right on top of Viola's fashion magazines. Tyrell hovered behind him, shifting his weight from foot to foot like a nervous getaway driver. Viola appeared from the kitchen, wiping her hands on her apron, her face a mask of anxious anticipation. "I do not need a doctor," I grumbled, shifting in my chair. "I am fine. Just old." "Nonsense," Vance said, opening his bag. "It never hurts to be sure. Now look at me, Mr. Hayes. Follow my finger." He held up a finger that was stained yellow with nicotine. He moved it back and forth in front of my face. I followed it with my eyes, making sure to lag just a fraction of a second behind. I wanted them to think I was slow, but I did not want them to think I was gone. Vance hummed thoughtfully. "His pupils are a little sluggish," he said to the room at large. "Tell me, Mr. Hayes, do you know what year it is?" "It is 2023, I said. Good, Vance said, sounding almost disappointed. "And do you know who is the president?" I answered him. I answered every basic question he threw at me. He asked me the day of the week. He asked me my address. He asked me to count backwards from 20. I did it all. I watched the frustration growing on Tyrell's face. He needed me to fail. He needed me to be the vegetable they were painting me to be. Vance leaned back, crossing his legs. He pulled a small pen light from his pocket. "You are doing well with the basics, Roland. Can I call you Roland? But dementia is tricky. It hides in the details. Tell me about yesterday. What did you have for lunch?" "I had a ham sandwich," I lied. I had actually eaten a granola bar in the park because I did not trust the food in the house, but I knew Viola would have told them she made sandwiches. "I see," Vance said, scribbling something on a notepad he had produced. "And do you remember where you put your keys yesterday?" "Tyrell says you lost them." "I did not lose them," I said, my voice rising with feigned irritation. "They were moved. Just like my medicine." Vance exchanged a look with Viola. "Paranoia," he muttered, loud enough for me to hear. "Classic symptom." "Let us try something else," Vance said, leaning forward, his eyes narrowing. "Let us go back further. Tyrell tells me you used to love football. Do you remember the '85 Bears?" I sat up straighter. This was my territory. This was not something you could fake. I was a season ticket holder until money got tight in '98. "I remember them," I said. "Who was the quarterback?" Vance asked, expecting me to stumble. "Jim McMahon," I said instantly. "Number 9. But everyone forgets about Steve Fuller. He played when Jim was injured." Vance blinked. He looked surprised. "Okay, sure." "And the Super Bowl, who did they play?" "The New England Patriots," I said. "Super Bowl 20, we beat them 46-10. It was in New Orleans. The Patriots actually scored first, a field goal by Tony Franklin after a fumble by Walter Payton. But then we crushed them. The defensive coordinator was Buddy Ryan. He invented the 46 defense. We sacked their quarterback 7 times that game." I recited the stats with the precision of a logistician. I saw Tyrell wince. I saw Viola frown. I was too lucid. I was too sharp. I was ruining their narrative with cold, hard facts. Vance stared at me for a long moment. He looked at his notepad, then he looked at Tyrell. He saw the desperation in my son's eyes. He saw the promise of payment that hung in the air. He cleared his throat and stood up. He turned his back to me, addressing Viola and Tyrell as if I were a piece of furniture. "It is as I feared," he said, his voice grave and professional. "This is a very common presentation. It is called confabulation." "Confabulation," Viola repeated, testing the word. "What does that mean, doctor?" "It means he is using old long-term memories to mask the decay of his short-term cognition," Vance lied smoothly. "He remembers 1985 perfectly because that part of his brain is calcified. It is locked in. But he cannot remember that he left the water running yesterday. He cannot remember losing his keys. He becomes aggressive and paranoid when challenged because his brain is trying to defend itself against the confusion. He is projecting his failures onto you, accusing you of moving his things." I listened to him twist my clarity into a disease. I listened to him turn my sharp mind into a symptom of madness. It was a masterclass in medical gaslighting. He was not just a bad doctor, he was a predator. "So what does that mean?" Tyrell asked, his voice trembling with hope. "It means he is in stage 2 dementia," Vance declared. "It is progressing rapidly. He is a danger to himself and others. He needs 24-hour supervision. He cannot be responsible for his own legal or financial decisions anymore. He is mentally incompetent." The words hung in the air. Mentally incompetent. It was the key to the lock. It was the phrase that would strip me of my rights, my home, and my dignity. I stood up. "I am not incompetent," I said, my voice booming in the small room. "I am sharper than you are, doctor. I know you are not Tyrell's friend. I know you are a fraud." Vance took a step back, feigning fear. "See," he said, pointing at me, "the aggression, the mood swings. He is unstable." Viola let out a sob. It was a terrible theatrical sound. "Oh, my poor Roland," she cried, covering her face with her hands. "I knew it. I knew something was wrong." I tried to deny it, but the doctor is right. "We cannot take care of him here, Tyrell. It is too dangerous." She walked over to Vance, who had pulled a document from his satchel. It was not a prescription pad. It was a legal form, a medical certification of incapacity. It was already filled out. All it needed was a signature. "I need you to sign this," Mrs. Hayes Vance said, handing her a pen. "This allows us to start the process of getting him the help he needs. It allows the state to recognize his condition so you can make decisions on his behalf." Viola did not hesitate. Her tears dried up instantly. She took the pen. She looked at me one last time, not with love, not with pity, but with triumph. "It is for your own good, Roland," she said. She signed the paper. The scratching of the pen on the page sounded like a shovel digging a grave. My grave. She handed the document back to Vance, who tucked it into his bag with a satisfied smirk. "I will file this with the county clerk in the morning," Vance said. "You should start looking into facilities immediately. The sooner he is settled, the safer everyone will be." Tyrell walked Vance to the door. He slipped an envelope into the doctor's hand as they shook. I saw it. It was thick. It was the cash I had refused to give him for his crypto scheme. He must have gotten it from the loan shark, adding more debt to the pile, digging the hole deeper. When they left, I sat back down. I did not scream. I did not fight. I let them think they had won. Viola went into the kitchen, humming a hymn. Tyrell went to his room, probably to call Emily and tell her the good news. I waited until the house was dark. I waited until the only sound was the settling of the foundation. Then I went to my closet. I reached into the pocket of my work jacket and pulled out the tissue containing the pill I had saved from the morning. I put on my coat and slipped out the back door. I walked 3 miles to the 24-hour shipping center. I paid cash to overnight the pill to a private toxicology lab in the city. I included a note requesting a full analysis and rush delivery of the results to Mr. O'Malley's office. They had their doctor. They had their fake diagnosis. But I had the evidence. And when the results came back, I would have proof of attempted poisoning. I walked back home under the streetlights, feeling the cool night air on my face. I was tired, but I was not beaten. They thought they had taken my future. But they had just handed me the weapon I needed to destroy theirs. The morning sun filtered through the blinds of my bedroom, but it brought no warmth to the cold pit in my stomach. I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the nightstand. To anyone else, it was just a table with a lamp and a bottle of pills. But to me, it was a crime scene. I spent 40 years managing logistics for a warehouse that supplied half of Chicago. My job was precision. My job was knowing exactly where a crate was placed and if it had been moved by even an inch. I knew my nightstand. I reached out but did not touch the bottle of blood pressure medication. I looked at the dust ring on the wood. The bottle was sitting exactly 2 centimeters to the left of the ring. I had placed it directly inside the ring last night before wedging the chair under my door. Someone had been in my room while I slept. The chair was still under the handle, but the lock on this door was old and easily picked with a hairpin. Viola knew how to do it. She used to do it when Tyrell was a baby and locked himself in. I picked up the bottle. The weight felt right, but the sound was wrong. The rattle was too sharp. I unscrewed the cap and poured a single pill into my calloused palm. My blood pressure medication was a distinct pale blue. This pill was blue, but it was the wrong shade. It was lighter, almost powdery. It looked like the generic sleeping pills Tyrell used when his guilty conscience kept him awake. They were not just trying to confuse me. They were trying to drug me. They wanted me lethargic and stumbling when Dr. Vance arrived. They wanted a zombie, not a man. My hand closed into a fist over the pill. I felt a surge of rage so hot it nearly blinded me. I wanted to storm into the kitchen and force this pill down Viola's throat. I wanted to ask her if 40 years of marriage meant so little that she would poison me like a rat in the basement. But I breathed in through my nose and out through my mouth. I controlled the rage. I had to be smarter. I had to be the ghost in my own house. I took a tissue from the box and wrapped the pill inside it, then tucked it deep into the pocket of my robe. I poured a glass of water from the carafe. I threw the water into the potted fern in the corner. Then I threw my head back and pretended to swallow, gulping air loudly enough for anyone listening outside the door to hear. I set the glass down with a clatter. I got dressed slowly. I put on my work boots even though I had no work to go to. They made me feel grounded. I checked the hidden pocket in my jacket to make sure the check and the deed were still there. They were my armor. I unlocked the door and removed the chair. I walked out into the hallway, dragging my feet just a little, letting my shoulders slump. If they wanted a senile old man, I would give them an Oscar-worthy performance. But behind my clouded eyes, I was watching everything. I was recording every betrayal. I walked into the kitchen and the smell of burnt toast hung in the air. Viola was standing by the sink. She did not look at me when I entered. She was too busy setting the stage for the next act of her play. There was a pot of vegetable soup boiling on the stove. It was strange because Viola never made soup for breakfast. She usually just had coffee and toast. "Good morning, Viola," I said, my voice raspy with sleep. She jumped as if she had not heard me coming. She turned around and her face was a mask of irritation. "You startled me, Roland," she snapped. "You are always creeping around like a ghost. Sit down. I made soup. You need to eat something soft. You had trouble chewing last night." I sat down. I had not had trouble chewing. The roast had been as tough as leather, but I nodded obediently. She ladled a bowl of hot soup and brought it over. As she placed it in front of me, her hand jerked. It was not a slip. It was a deliberate flick of the wrist. The bowl tipped. Hot orange liquid splashed all over the table and onto the linoleum floor. It missed me by inches, but the mess was catastrophic. "Oh my God, Roland," she screamed, jumping back. "Look what you did. You knocked it right out of my hand." I sat there motionless. My hands were in my lap. I had not touched her. I had not touched the bowl. But she was already creating the narrative. "I did not touch it, Viola," I said calmly. "You grabbed my wrist," she yelled, her voice shrill and carrying. "You are getting violent, Roland, just like with the water hose yesterday. You do not even know what you are doing anymore. Look at this mess." She grabbed a rag and started wiping the floor, aggressively muttering to herself. I watched her. I watched the woman I had loved since high school frame me for a spill she created. It was heartbreaking, but it was also clarifying. There was no love left here, only strategy. Then she stood up and grabbed the wall phone. She dialed a number I knew well. It was Mrs. Johnson, the neighborhood gossip. If you wanted the whole block to know something, you told Mrs. Johnson. "Hello, Beatrice." Viola said, her voice shifting instantly from anger to tearful exhaustion. "I am sorry to call so early. I just needed to hear a friendly voice. It is Roland. He is getting worse." "Yes." Just now he slapped a bowl of hot soup out of my hands. He got confused and aggressive. "I am scared, Beatrice. I do not know how much longer I can handle him here. He needs professional care." I sat there and listened to her destroy my reputation. I listened to her paint me as a violent monster to the woman who lived 3 doors down. Mrs. Johnson would tell everyone at the grocery store. By noon, the whole neighborhood would be looking at me with pity and fear. I stood up. The chair scraped against the floor. Viola turned her back to me, whispering into the receiver. I walked out of the kitchen. I did not clean up the soup. If I was the villain they wanted, I would not clean up their messes. I walked to the front door and opened it. "Where do you think you are going?" she hissed, covering the mouthpiece. "I am going for a walk," I said, "to clear my head. Maybe the fresh air will stop me from being so aggressive." I slammed the door before she could answer. I walked down the street, feeling the eyes of the neighbors on me. I knew what they were thinking. Poor Viola, dealing with that crazy old man. Let them think it. The truth was coming, and when it arrived, it would be louder than any gossip Mrs. Johnson could spread. I walked 3 blocks to the main avenue and flagged down a taxi. I needed to get out of the neighborhood. I needed to go somewhere where nobody knew my name or the lies my wife was spreading. I told the driver to take me to the electronics store on the north side of the city. I had a specific shopping list and I needed to pay in cash. The store was a massive warehouse of technology humming with the sound of televisions and computers. I felt out of place in my old work clothes, but I walked with purpose. I found the security section. I did not want a big system. I needed something invisible. I found what I was looking for on a bottom shelf. 2 spy cameras, no bigger than a quarter. They were wireless and activated by motion. They recorded directly to a memory card and could be viewed on a phone app. I bought them along with a cheap burner smartphone. I did not want to install the app on my regular phone in case Tyrell decided to snoop through it while I was sleeping. I paid with bills I had stashed in my wallet from the lawyer's advance. The cashier looked at me, a young kid with piercings. He did not ask questions. He just bagged the items and went back to his phone. I took the taxi back but had him drop me off a block away. I slipped into the house through the back garden gate. The house was quiet. Viola's car was gone. She was probably out spreading more lies or meeting with Emily to strategize. It was the perfect opportunity. I worked quickly. My hands, which were supposedly too shaky to hold a soup bowl, were steady as a surgeon's. I placed the first camera in the living room tucked high up on the bookshelf between 2 old encyclopedias. It had a perfect view of the entire room and the hallway leading to the bedrooms. The second camera went into my bedroom. I hid it inside the air vent cover, angling it down toward my nightstand and the dresser where I kept my few valuables. I synced them to the burner phone. The picture was crisp and clear. I felt a grim satisfaction. Now I had eyes. Now I was not just a victim. I was a witness. I hid the burner phone inside an old pair of winter boots in the back of my closet. Then I sat in my chair and waited. Viola came home an hour later. She ignored me. Tyrell and Emily arrived in the evening. They went straight to the kitchen, whispering. I stayed in my room, claiming a headache. At midnight, when the house was finally silent, I retrieved the burner phone. I sat in the dark, the blue light of the screen illuminating my face. I scrolled through the footage from the afternoon. The video showed my bedroom. The timestamp was 2 p.m. The door opened and Emily walked in. She did not knock. She did not hesitate. She walked straight to my dresser. She began pulling open drawers, rifling through my socks and underwear. Her face was twisted in a scowl. She tossed my clothes onto the floor, showing zero respect for my property. She moved to the nightstand. She picked up my Bible and shook it, hoping cash would fall out. Nothing did. Then she spoke. Her voice was tinny on the recording, but clear enough. "Where is it, you old miser?" she hissed. "I know you have it. Nobody walks around this broke without a stash." She kicked the bed frame in frustration. "Damn it," she cursed. "We are running out of time. If we do not find that money before the 1st of the month, Tyrell is dead meat." I watched the video 3 times. I watched my daughter-in-law invade my sanctuary. I watched her hunt for my meager savings like a scavenger. I watched her confirm that my son was in deep trouble with dangerous people. I turned off the phone and hid it again. Then I took out my regular cell phone. I went into the bathroom and turned on the shower to mask my voice. I dialed Mr. O'Malley's personal number. He picked up on the second ring. "Roland, is everything all right?" he asked, his voice thick with sleep. "No," I said. "Nothing is all right. They are escalating. They changed my medication. They are trying to drug me to make me look incompetent. And I have video proof of them searching my room for money." There was a silence on the line. Then O'Malley spoke, his voice sharp and awake. "Roland, you need to get out of there. This is dangerous. If they are desperate enough to drug you, they might be desperate enough to do worse." "I cannot leave yet," I said. "Not until I have everything. Not until I can prove the conspiracy. If I leave now, they will spin it. They will say I wandered off. They will use it to get the guardianship. I need to catch them in the act of something undeniable." "Roland, listen to me," O'Malley said. "I can get a court order. I can protect your assets." "Protecting the assets is not enough," I interrupted. "I need to protect my name. I need to expose them for what they are. But I need you to do something for me. Lock down everything. Put the ranch and the cash into a blind trust immediately. Make sure that even if they forge my signature, they cannot touch a dime. And get a private investigator ready. I'm going to need background checks on everyone, especially Emily." "Consider it done," O'Malley said. "But Roland, watch your back. These people are not your family anymore. They are predators." "I know," I said, looking at my face in the mirror. The eyes staring back were hard and cold. "I know exactly what they are. And they are about to find out exactly who I am." I hung up the phone. I turned off the shower. I walked back into my bedroom. I looked at the air vent where the camera was hiding. I laid down on the bed, but I did not close my eyes. I lay there in the dark, waiting for the next move in this deadly game of chess. I was a pawn no longer. I was the king, and I was ready to strike. I sat in the cab of my truck, parked 3 blocks away from the house in the shadow of an old oak tree that obscured me from the street view. The engine was off, but the heat of my anger kept me warm enough against the chill of the Chicago evening. On the passenger seat lay a thick manila envelope. It was heavy and taped shut with red security tape. It had cost me $5,000 of the advance I received from Mr. O'Malley. It was the most expensive reading material I had ever purchased, but as I ran my thumb under the seal, I knew it would be worth more than gold. I pulled out the stack of papers. The smell of fresh toner filled the cab. The private investigator O'Malley recommended was a former detective named Miller, and he did not do things by halves. The first section was clipped together with a photo of Emily. She was not wearing her usual blazer and fake smile. In this photo, she was arguing with a man outside a pawn shop holding a jewelry box. I turned the page to the background check. It was a massacre of credibility. Emily always bragged about her status as a top-tier real estate agent. She talked about closings and escrows and commissions as if she were the queen of the housing market. But the document in front of me told a different story. A state licensing board order stamped in red ink 2 years ago declared her license revoked. Not suspended. Revoked. She had been caught skimming escrow deposits from first-time home buyers. She had stolen down payments to fund her lifestyle. She was not a realtor. She was a fraud. I flipped through her financial records. It was a sea of red ink. She had 7 credit cards maxed out to the limit, $80,000 in consumer debt. She was paying minimum payments on one card by taking cash advances from another. It was a house of cards waiting for a strong breeze to knock it over. And I was that breeze. She was not pushing Tyrell to sell my house because it was a smart financial move. She was pushing him because she was drowning. She needed my equity to pay off her fraud before the law caught up with her again. She looked at me and saw a lifeline, but she did not know that the lifeline was about to turn into a noose. I set Emily's file down on the dashboard. I stared at her picture for a moment. Her eyes were hard and greedy, even in a grainy surveillance photo. I had always known she was ambitious, but I never realized she was a criminal. It gave me a strange sense of validation. I was not just a grumpy old man who disliked his daughter-in-law. I was a man with good instincts who had spotted a snake in the grass long before it bit him. I picked up the second file. This one was labeled Tyrell Hayes, my son, my only child. I took a deep breath before opening it. I wanted to see failed business plans. I wanted to see that he had tried to start a landscaping company or a delivery service and just had bad luck. I wanted to believe that his incompetence was innocent. But the first page shattered that hope. It was a surveillance log. Subject enters the Golden Q Pool Hall on 47th Street at 11 p.m. Subject exits at 3 a.m. Subject meets with known associate of the King Syndicate in the alley behind the building. The King Syndicate. I knew that name. Everyone in this neighborhood knew that name. They were not investors. They were loan sharks who ran the illegal sports betting rings on the South Side. Tyrell was not an entrepreneur. He was a gambler. I turned the page to the financial breakdown. Tyrell had lost $60,000 betting on college basketball in March alone. He had tried to chase his losses by doubling down on baseball in April and lost another $40,000. The total debt was staggering, $200,000. The exact amount they were hoping to get from a quick cash sale of my house. I felt a tear slide down my cheek. I wiped it away angrily. My son was not building a future. He was digging a hole, and he was willing to throw my body into it to fill the gap. The investigator had included a transcript of a text message intercepted from Tyrell's phone just 2 days ago. The message was from a blocked number. It read simply, 1 week Tyrell. 1 week or we take a finger. Then we take the hand. I closed the folder. The air in the truck felt thin. I struggled to breathe. 1 week. That was the timeline. That explained the panic in Emily's voice the other night. That explained the rush to get Dr. Vance to sign the papers. They were not just greedy, they were terrified. They were operating under a death threat. If they did not deliver my house to the sharks in 7 days, Tyrell was going to lose pieces of himself. And instead of coming to me, instead of asking his father for help or confessing his sins, he decided to destroy me. He decided that erasing his father was easier than facing his mistakes. That was the ultimate betrayal. He valued his pride more than my life. I put the papers back into the envelope and hid it under the passenger seat inside a locked toolbox I kept there. I checked my reflection in the rearview mirror. My eyes were red, but my jaw was set. I knew what I had to do. I had to go back in there. I had to sit at that table and look into the faces of the people who were plotting my demise, and I had to give them exactly what they wanted. I drove the 3 blocks to the house. I parked the truck crookedly in the driveway, leaving one wheel on the grass, a small detail but one that would annoy Viola. I walked up the steps, muttering to myself. I unlocked the door and stepped into the living room. Viola and Emily were sitting on the couch watching television. Tyrell was pacing by the window. When I entered, they all froze. They were watching me, searching for signs that the drugs were working. I decided to give them a show. I looked around the room with a vacant expression. I let my mouth hang open slightly. I looked at Viola. I blinked slowly, as if trying to focus on a distant memory. "Hello, Beatrice," I said, my voice soft and confused. "Is dinner ready yet? I am starving." The room went silent. Beatrice was Viola's mother. She had been dead for 15 years. I saw Viola's eyes widen. She looked at Emily. A slow, cruel smile spread across Emily's face. It was the look of a hunter who sees the prey limp. Viola stood up and walked over to me. She put a hand on my arm, but there was no warmth in it. It was a test. "Roll in honey," she said, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. "I am Viola. Beatrice is gone. Do you remember?" I frowned, pulling away from her. "No, you are Beatrice," I insisted, raising my voice just a little. "You are wearing that blue dress I like. Where is Viola? Is she still at school?" I saw Tyrell stop pacing. He looked at his wife. He looked relieved. He actually looked relieved that his father was losing his mind because it meant his fingers were safe. "The medication is working," Emily whispered. She did not even bother to lower her voice much. She thought I was too far gone to understand. "Come on, Dad," Tyrell said, guiding me toward the dining room. "Let us get you some food. You are just tired. Viola will fix you a plate." I let him lead me. I shuffled my feet. I sat down at the table and stared at the empty placemat. Viola brought out a pot of stew. She ladled it into a bowl and set it in front of me. "Here you go, Roland," she said. "Eat up." I picked up my spoon. I held it with a trembling hand, intentionally letting it clatter against the side of the bowl. I splashed a little broth onto the tablecloth. "Oh, look at him," Emily said from the doorway. "He is a mess." Dr. Vance was right. "It is progressing faster than we thought. We need to call the lawyer in the morning," Tyrell said. "If he is calling you Beatrice, we have a strong case for immediate guardianship. We cannot wait." Viola sat down opposite me. She watched me eat with a look of pure satisfaction. She was not sad that her husband was fading. She was ecstatic. She saw dollar signs in my vacant stare. "You know," Emily said, walking into the room and pouring herself a glass of water, "maybe we should start packing up his things. If he goes into the facility next week, we do not want to be rushing. We can start clearing out the den tomorrow." Tyrell nodded. "Yeah, good idea. We can sell the desk and the books. He won't need them." I chewed a piece of potato. It tasted like ash. They were carving up my life right in front of me. They were planning the estate sale while I was still eating dinner. I looked up at Viola. "Beatrice," I said again, forcing a smile. "This is good stew. Did you put the secret ingredient in it?" Viola laughed. It was a cold, sharp sound. "Yes, Roland. I put the secret ingredient in." She meant the sedatives. She thought she was being clever. But the secret ingredient was my knowledge. The secret ingredient was the fact that I had swapped the pills again this morning. I wasn't eating their poison. I was eating their arrogance. I finished the bowl. I stood up, leaving the dirty dishes on the table. I wandered toward the hallway, stopping to stare at a picture on the wall as if I had never seen it before. "I am going to bed, Beatrice," I said. "Good night." "Good night, Roland," Viola called out. "Sleep tight." I walked to my room. I closed the door. I did not lock it this time. I wanted them to feel confident. I wanted them to think the door was open. I lay down on the bed, fully clothed. I stared at the ceiling fan spinning slowly above me. They thought they had won. They thought the game was over. But they did not know that I had already moved my king into position. Tomorrow I would unleash the next phase of my plan. I would let them think they were driving the car right up until the moment I cut the brakes. I reached into my pocket and touched the burner phone. I had hours of audio recording now. I had the investigator's report. I had the lab results coming. I was building a fortress of evidence around myself brick by brick, and when I was done, I would trap them inside it and throw away the key. I closed my eyes, but I did not sleep. I replayed the image of Tyrell's face when he realized I was confused. The relief, the hope, it burned me. It seared my soul. But pain is a fuel, and tonight my tank was full. The storm outside mirrored the chaos that was about to erupt inside my home. Rain lashed against the windows like handfuls of gravel thrown by an angry giant. Thunder rattled the floorboards beneath my bed, vibrating through the mattress and into my bones. It was 2 a.m, but I was wide awake, staring at the ceiling fan that spun lazily in the dark. I knew sleep was impossible. My instincts, forged over decades of managing high-pressure logistics, told me that the pressure in this house had reached a critical mass. Something was going to break tonight. I heard the front door slam open downstairs. It hit the wall with a violence that shook the house. Then came the sound of heavy, uncoordinated footsteps thudding up the stairs. It was not the stealthy creep of a thief. It was the clumsy charge of a desperate man. My bedroom door flew open, crashing against the dresser. The hallway light flooded into the room, blinding me for a second. Tyrell stood in the doorway. He was soaking wet water dripping from his clothes onto the carpet I had vacuumed for 20 years. He swayed on his feet, clutching a bottle of whiskey in one hand and a crumpled sheaf of papers in the other. But it was not the alcohol that held my attention. It was his shirt. The white cotton was torn at the collar and stained with fresh, bright red blood. His lip was split, and his left eye was swelling shut. The loan sharks had sent their final warning, and they had written it on my son's face. He stumbled into the room, bringing the smell of ozone-cheap liquor and metallic fear with him. "Get up!" he roared, his words slurring together. "Get up right now, old man. We are done waiting." I sat up slowly, pulling the quilt up to my chest, feigning the confusion of a senile man woken from a deep sleep. "Tyrell, what is happening?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Why are you bleeding? Did you fall?" He threw the bottle against the wall. It shattered, spraying glass and amber liquid over my wedding photo. "Do not play dumb with me," he screamed. "You know what this is about. You know exactly what I need." He lunged at the bed, grabbing my arm with a grip that was surprisingly strong. He yanked me forward, his fingernails digging into my skin. He dragged me out of the bed. My bare feet hit the cold floor. He did not let go. He pulled me toward the small desk in the corner of the room where I used to pay the bills. "Sign the papers," he shouted, shoving the crumpled documents onto the desk surface. "Sign them now. The power of attorney, the deed transfer. Sign it all. I need the money tonight, Dad. They said they would come back tomorrow. They said they would take my hand." I looked at him. I looked at the terror in his eyes. He was a cornered animal. He was terrified, but his fear did not make him beg for help. It made him attack the only person who had ever truly protected him. I looked down at the papers. They were damp from the rain and wrinkled from his grip. It was the general power of attorney granting Tyrell Hayes full control over all assets and property of Roland Hayes. It was my death warrant. "I cannot sign this, Tyrell," I stammered, leaning my weight against the desk, as if my legs could not support me. "I do not understand what it says. I need my glasses. Where are my glasses? You do not need glasses to sign your name," he yelled, shoving a pen into my hand. "Just write your name. Right there on the line. Do it." I held the pen. I let my hand hover over the paper. I started to shake. I let the tremor start in my wrist and travel up to my shoulder until my whole arm was vibrating. It was not entirely an act. The adrenaline coursing through my veins made the shaking real enough. "I cannot," I whispered, dropping the pen. "My hands. They will not work. I am scared, Tyrell. Please, stop yelling." Tyrell stared at the pen rolling across the desk. His face turned a shade of purple I had never seen before. The veins in his neck bulged. He let out a sound that was half scream, half sob. "Pick it up," he commanded. "Pick it up and sign the paper." "I cannot," I repeated, backing away from him. He snapped. The last tether of his sanity broke. He stepped forward and swung his arm back. It happened in slow motion. I saw his hand coming. I saw the blood on his knuckles. I could have blocked it. I could have caught his wrist and twisted it until he dropped to his knees. I still had the strength of a man who lifted crates for a living. But I did not. I let it happen. His open palm connected with the side of my face with a sickening crack. The force of the blow spun me around. I lost my footing. I fell sideways, crashing into the corner of the heavy oak dresser. My temple struck the sharp wood edge. A blinding flash of white light exploded behind my eyes, followed immediately by the warm, wet sensation of blood trickling down my face. I crumpled to the floor, lying in a heap by the closet door. The room spun. The pain was sharp and hot, radiating from my temple. I touched my head and my fingers came away red. "Oh my God," Emily gasped from the doorway. I looked up through the haze of pain. Emily and Viola were standing there. They had watched the whole thing. They had watched my son assault me. Tyrell stood over me, breathing heavily, his hand still raised, chest heaving. He looked at me, then at his hand, then back at me. For a second, I thought he might apologize. I thought the sight of his father bleeding on the floor might snap him out of his madness. But then Viola spoke. Her voice cut through the room, colder than the wind outside. She did not rush to me. She did not check my wound. She stood with her arms crossed, her silk robe pulled tight around her. "Just sign the papers, Roland," she said, her voice flat and bored. "Look what you made him do. Are you going to torment the boy until he dies? Sign the paper and end this misery." I looked at my wife, the woman I had shared a bed with for 40 years. She looked at my blood as if it were a spilled drink she would have to clean up later. There was no love in her eyes. There was not even hate. There was just annoyance. She viewed my pain as an inconvenience to her comfort. Emily stepped into the room. She looked at Tyrell, then at the papers. She picked up the pen and held it out to me, not bothering to help me sit up. "You heard her," she said, her lip curling in disgust. "Stop being dramatic. It is just a scratch. Sign the document so we can all go back to sleep. Tyrell needs this done tonight. Do not make him hit you again." She was threatening me. She was using my son as a weapon, and she was enjoying it. I looked at the three of them towering over me, the holy trinity of my betrayal. My son, the brute. My wife, the enabler. My daughter-in-law, the architect. Something inside me died in that moment. It was the last lingering hope that this was all a misunderstanding. It was the last shred of fatherly instinct that wanted to save Tyrell from himself. That instinct turned to ash. The man lying on the floor was no longer their father or husband. He was a stranger, and strangers owe each other nothing. I reached up with a trembling hand. I took the pen from Emily. I dragged myself up to a sitting position, leaning against the dresser for support. Blood dripped from my temple onto the collar of my pajamas. "Give me the paper," I whispered. Tyrell snatched the paper from the desk and thrust it in front of me, holding it against the floorboards. "Here," he said, his voice shaking. "Just sign it." I placed the tip of the pen on the signature line. I took a breath. I knew something they did not know. I knew that the signature card on file at my bank and with the county deeds office required a very specific flourish on the letter R and a loop on the D. It was a security measure I had adopted years ago after a check fraud scare at the warehouse. I pressed the pen to the paper. I wrote Roland Hayes, but I wrote it straight. I did not loop the D. I made the R sharp and angular. To the naked eye, it looked like my name written by a shaky hand. But to a forensic handwriting analyst or a diligent bank clerk, it was a forgery. It was invalid. I finished the signature and let the pen drop from my fingers. It rolled away, stopping in a pool of my own blood. "There," I said, my voice devoid of emotion. "Take it." Tyrell grabbed the paper. He stared at the signature, his eyes wide and manic. He did not check the details. He just saw the ink. He let out a laugh that sounded like a bark. "He did it," he said, looking at Emily. "He finally did it. We are saved." Emily snatched the paper from him, checking it quickly. "It looks shaky," she muttered, "but it will pass. He is old. Nobody expects calligraphy. We can get this notarized in the morning with Paul." Viola turned away without another word. She walked out of the room back to her warm bed, leaving her husband bleeding on the floor. Tyrell and Emily followed her, their focus entirely on the piece of paper that they thought was their golden ticket. Neither of them offered me a bandage. Neither of them offered me a hand up. They just left me there in the dark with the shattered whiskey bottle and the sound of the rain. I sat there for a long time. I listened to them celebrating downstairs. I heard the clink of glasses. They were toasting their victory. They were toasting the fact that they had beaten the old man into submission. I slowly pulled myself up. My head throbbed with a rhythm that matched the thunder. I walked to the bathroom and looked in the mirror. The gash on my temple was deep, about 2 inches long. It would need stitches. My eye was already bruising. I looked like a prize fighter who had stayed in the ring too long. I cleaned the wound as best I could with cold water and wrapped a towel around my head. I did not go back to bed. I sat in the chair by the window and watched the storm rage. I felt a strange calm settle over me. The uncertainty was gone. The hesitation was gone. They had crossed the final line. They had used violence. I waited until the sun began to rise, turning the gray sky a bruised purple. I waited until the house was silent again, until their drunken celebration had faded into sleep. Then I quietly dressed. I put on my coat and my hat, pulling the brim low to cover the bandage. I slipped out of the house and walked to the bus stop. I took the first bus to the downtown hospital. I did not go to the local clinic where they might ask questions or call the house. I went to the big trauma center where I was just a number. I walked into the emergency room. The nurse at the triage desk looked up. She saw the blood-soaked towel. She saw the bruising. "Name?" she asked. "Roland Hayes," I said. "What happened?" "Mr. Hayes," she asked, typing into her computer. "I fell," I said automatically. But then I stopped. I looked at her. I remembered the plan. I remembered the mission. "Actually," I said, my voice firm, "I was assaulted. I need a full medical report and photographs of the injuries for legal purposes." The nurse stopped typing. She looked at me with new interest. She nodded slowly. "We can do that, honey. Take a seat." I sat down in the plastic chair. I was in pain. I was tired. I was heartbroken. But I was also armed. I had the video footage of the theft. I had the pill at the lab. And now I would have official medical documentation of the assault. They thought they had a power of attorney. But all they really had was a signed confession of their own cruelty. And I was going to make sure they paid for every drop of blood I had left on that bedroom floor. The sun had barely cracked the horizon when the sound of a diesel engine idling outside my window pulled me from a light sleep. It was not the garbage truck, and it was not a delivery van. It was a rhythmic, rattling sound like a vehicle that was held together by rust and bad intentions. I sat up in bed and touched the bandage on my temple. The pain was a dull throb, now a reminder of the line my son had crossed just a few hours ago. I heard the front door open downstairs. There was no knock, just the heavy tread of boots on hardwood. Voices murmured low and urgent. Then my bedroom door swung open. Tyrell stood there. He was wearing the same clothes as the night before, rumpled and stained with sweat. He looked like a man who was running from a ghost. Behind him stood two men. They were large, thick-necked, and wearing scrubs that were a shade of blue too bright for the hour. They did not look like nurses. They looked like bouncers who had found a second career in human disposal. "Dad, get dressed," Tyrell said, his voice flat. "You are going on a trip." I looked at the men. One of them held a clipboard. I saw the papers clipped to it. The forgery Tyrell had forced me to sign and the certification of incapacity from Dr. Vance. They were armed with lies. "Where am I going?" I asked, letting my voice waver. "Is it to the hospital for my head?" "No," Tyrell said, avoiding my eyes. "It is a place where you can rest, a place where they can take care of you properly." "We cannot do it anymore, Dad. You are too much for us. You are dangerous. Dangerous." The word hung in the air. I was the one with stitches in my head. I was the one who had been robbed, but in their narrative, I was the threat. The larger of the two orderlies stepped forward. "Mr. Hayes, we need you to come with us voluntarily, or we will have to assist you. It is better for everyone if you just walk." I stood up slowly. I did not fight. I did not scream. I needed this to happen. I needed them to complete the crime. If I resisted now, it would just be a domestic dispute. If they took me out of my house against my will and locked me up based on forged documents, it was kidnapping. It was false imprisonment. It was a felony. I put on my pants and my shoes. I reached for my jacket, the one with the check hidden in the lining. "Leave the jacket," Tyrell said quickly. "You won't need it where you are going. They have clothes for you there." I froze. That jacket was my lifeline. It held the proof of my freedom. I clutched it to my chest. "I am cold," I whined, letting my hands shake. "I need my jacket, Tyrell. It is my favorite. Please let me take my jacket." The orderly looked at Tyrell. "Let him take the coat, buddy. It is freezing outside. We do not need him getting pneumonia before we get him processed." Tyrell hesitated, then nodded curtly. "Fine. Just let's go." I put the jacket on, zipping it up to my chin. I felt the paper crackle against my ribs. I walked out of the room, flanked by the two men. We went down the stairs. Viola was standing in the hallway, clutching her robe. She had a tissue in her hand, but her eyes were dry. She looked at me with a mixture of guilt and relief. "Goodbye, Roland," she whispered. "It is for the best. you will see." I looked at her. I memorized her face in that moment, the betrayal etched into every line. "Beatrice," I said softly, using her mother's name one last time. "Will you come visit me?" She flinched. "I will try," she said, turning away. The orderlies gripped my arms. They marched me out the front door and down the walkway. The van waiting at the curb was white, but the paint was peeling, revealing patches of gray primer underneath. There was no logo on the side, no medical cross, just a sliding door that opened with a screech of metal on metal. They guided me into the back. The seats were covered in cracked vinyl that smelled of stale smoke and bleach. I sat down. Tyrell stood on the sidewalk watching. "This is a nice place, Dad," he called out. "It is like a resort. You are going to love it." He closed the door. The latch clicked shut. It sounded like a prison cell locking. I watched him through the tinted window as the van pulled away. He did not wave. He just turned around and walked back into my house, eager to start selling off the pieces of my life. The drive took 40 minutes. We left the decent streets of my neighborhood and headed toward the industrial district on the edge of the city. The buildings here were low and squat, surrounded by chain-link fences topped with razor wire. The sky seemed grayer here, heavy with smog and neglect. The van slowed down and turned into a driveway marked by a faded wooden sign. Sunnyvale Senior Care. The name was a cruel joke. There was no sun here and definitely no Vale. It was a 2-story brick building that looked like a converted factory. The windows were small and barred. The grass in the front yard was dead patches of dirt showing through like sores. The orderlies opened the door and hauled me out. The air hit me first. It did not smell like fresh-cut grass or morning dew. It smelled of industrial disinfectant masking the underlying stench of urine and boiled cabbage. It was the smell of despair. They walked me through the front entrance. The lobby was dim lit by flickering fluorescent tubes that hummed like angry insects. The floor was linoleum scuffed and yellowed with age. Behind a glass partition, a receptionist chewed gum and barely looked up as we entered. "New admission," the orderly grunted, slapping the clipboard onto the counter. "Hayes, Roland, involuntary commitment, dementia and aggressive behavior, payment secured by family." The receptionist typed something into a computer that looked 20 years old. "Room 104 is open," she said without making eye contact. "Take him back. Dr. Miller will do the intake later." They led me down a long hallway. The doors to the rooms were open. I looked inside as we passed. I saw elderly men and women sitting in wheelchairs staring at walls. They looked like empty shells. Their eyes were vacant. Their clothes were mismatched and stained. One woman was moaning softly, a low, keening sound that made my hair stand up. Another man was rocking back and forth, clutching a doll. This was not a care facility. This was a warehouse for the unwanted. This was where families dumped their burdens when they wanted to forget them. And this was where my wife and son had sent me to rot. They pushed me into room 104. It was a small square room with 2 beds. One was occupied by a man who was asleep, his mouth open, snoring wetly. The other bed was empty, stripped to the plastic mattress cover. There was a small metal nightstand and a wardrobe with a broken hinge. "Sit," the orderly commanded, pointing to the empty bed. "Someone will be by to get your vitals. Do not cause trouble, old man. We have ways of handling trouble." They left, closing the door but not locking it. I sat on the plastic mattress. It crunched under my weight. I looked around the room. The paint was peeling in long strips from the ceiling. There was a water stain in the corner that looked like a map of a forgotten country. I checked my watch. It was 7:15 a.m. I did not unpack. I did not take off my jacket. I sat there and waited. I counted the seconds. I listened to the sounds of the facility waking up. The rattle of a medication cart, the shout of a nurse, the crying of a resident down the hall. My heart was beating a slow, steady rhythm. I was not afraid. I was angry, but it was a cold, focused anger. I was recording everything in my mind, the smell, the peeling paint, the neglect. I was building the lawsuit in my head, adding zeros to the settlement figure with every minute that passed. At 7:45 a.m., the door opened again. I expected a nurse. Instead, Viola walked in. She was wearing a coat and holding a purse, clutching it tightly to her chest. She looked out of place here, her perfume warring with the stench of the hallway. She did not come in far. She stayed by the door as if afraid that the despair of the place might be contagious. "Roland," she said, her voice tight, "I just wanted to make sure you got settled." I looked at her. I looked at the woman who had promised to love me in sickness and in health. She had brought me to hell, and left me at the gate. "This is it, Viola?" I asked, gesturing to the room. "This is the resort. It is temporary." She lied, her eyes darting around the room, avoiding the man in the other bed. "Just until you get better. Just until the doctors say you are safe." I stood up. She took a step back, fear flashing in her eyes. She thought I was going to hurt her. She believed her own lies about my aggression. "You should go," I said. "You have a house to sell. You have money to count. Do not let me keep you." She swallowed hard. "I brought you some toiletries," she said, placing a small plastic bag on the nightstand. "Soap? Toothbrush. I will come back on Sunday." She would not come back. We both knew it. She turned and walked out the door, her heels clicking rapidly on the linoleum as she fled the scene of her crime. I watched her go. I watched the last thread of my old life snap and wither. I sat back down. I checked my watch again. 7:55 a.m. Any minute now. At exactly 8 a.m., the front doors of the facility burst open. I heard it from my room. It was not the screech of the van door. It was the authoritative slam of heavy double doors hitting the walls. Then came the sound of voices. Loud, confident voices. "Where is Roland Hayes?" a voice boomed. It was a voice I recognized. It was the voice of a man who charged $500 an hour to argue with judges. It was Mr. O'Malley. I stood up and walked to the doorway of my room. I looked down the hall. At the nurse's station, chaos had erupted. Mr. O'Malley stood there in a charcoal suit that cost more than this entire building. Flanking him were 4 uniformed police officers and 2 men in suits who looked like state investigators. The receptionist was standing up, looking terrified. "You cannot just barge in here," she squeaked. "I have a court order signed by Judge Harrison 20 minutes ago," O'Malley roared, holding up a document. "This facility is holding Mr. Roland Hayes against his will based on fraudulent documentation. If you do not produce him in 10 seconds, I will have every person in this building arrested for kidnapping." "Roland, I am here." I stepped into the hallway. I straightened my jacket. I lifted my chin. I was not the hunched old man anymore. I was Roland Hayes. "Mr. O'Malley," I called out, my voice clear and strong. "I am right here." O'Malley turned. He saw me. He saw the bandage on my head. He saw the grim surroundings. His face hardened. "Officers, get him out of there," O'Malley commanded. The police officers moved down the hall. They escorted me away from room 104. They walked me past the staring residents and the shocked staff. We reached the lobby. The administrator, a sweaty man in a cheap tie, had come running out of his office. "What is the meaning of this?" he demanded. "Mr." Hayes was admitted by his family. "We have the papers." "Your papers are forgeries," O'Malley said, cutting him off. "And your facility is now a crime scene. We will be in touch." We walked out the front doors. The morning air outside was still smoggy, but it tasted like freedom. A black town car was waiting at the curb. The driver opened the door. "Where to?" Mr. Hayes, O'Malley asked as we settled into the leather seats. "Take me to the Ritz-Carlton," I said. "I have a reservation." "And O'Malley." "Yes, Roland. Call the locksmith. I want every lock on that house changed by noon. And tell the bank to freeze everything. The war is on." O'Malley smiled a wolfish grin. "With pleasure." As the car pulled away, I looked back at the Sunnyvale Senior Care sign one last time. My family thought they had buried me there. They thought I was gone. They were about to find out that they had not buried a body. They had planted a seed. And the harvest was going to be bitter. I sat in the plush velvet armchair of the presidential suite at the Ritz-Carlton. The room smelled of fresh lilies and expensive leather, a stark contrast to the urine and bleach scent that still clung to my clothes from the nursing home. I had taken a long hot shower, scrubbing my skin until it was raw, but the feeling of Sunnyvale lingered. I poured myself a glass of aged whiskey from the crystal decanter. It was smooth and warmed my chest, but it did nothing to melt the ice around my heart. I picked up the burner phone. I had not turned off the cameras in my house. I needed to see what they were doing. I needed to witness the celebration of my demise. On the small screen, I saw my living room. It was brightly lit. Tyrell was standing in the center of the room holding a bottle of champagne. It was the same bottle I had bought 2 days ago. The $20 bottle I had intended to share with them to celebrate our new life. Now they were drinking it to celebrate my erasure. Viola was sitting on the sofa laughing. It was a sound I had not heard in years. She looked younger, lighter. The burden of her husband was gone, and she was radiant. Emily was pacing, holding a calculator and a notepad, furiously punching in numbers. "To the future," Tyrell shouted, raising his glass. to the end of the dry spell, and to the old man for finally being useful for once in his life. Viola clinked her glass against his. He is happy where he is, she said, her voice devoid of any guilt. He is with people his own age. We did the right thing. It was the only humane option. I took a sip of whiskey. Humane. They had thrown me into a pit and called it a sanctuary. Tyrell's phone rang. He hushed the women and answered it on speaker. It was the real estate investor. The shark who bought distressed properties for pennies on the dollar. Mr. Hayes, the voice crackled. We are ready to move. I have the cashier's check for $250,000. We can sign the deed transfer at the title company tomorrow morning at 9. That is perfect, Tyrell said, his voice trembling with greed. We will be there. We have the power of attorney signed and ready. Great, bring the keys, the investor said. My crew will be there by noon to start gutting the place. Tyrell hung up. He let out a whoop of joy. Did you hear that? He yelled. Cash. Tomorrow. We are rich. Emily hugged him. We pay off the syndicate first, she whispered fiercely. Then we pay my credit cards. Then we get out of this dump. I watched them. I watched them toast to the sale of the home my father had built with his own hands. I watched Viola start dragging my favorite recliner toward the front door, preparing to put it out on the curb for the trash collectors. She did not want anything of mine left in the house when the buyers arrived. I turned off the phone. I did not need to see any more. I knew the schedule. 9 a.m. at the Chicago Title Company on Wacker Drive. They thought they were walking into a payday, but they were walking into a buzzsaw. I finished my drink. I checked the time. I had a meeting with O'Malley in an hour to finalize the trap. I went to the window and looked out at the city lights. They were beautiful. They were cold, just like my family. The next morning, I did not go to the title company. I did not need to be in the room to feel the impact. O'Malley had sent his private investigator Miller to sit in the lobby and observe. Miller was wired for sound, so I listened to the audio feed from the comfort of my hotel room while eating a breakfast of Eggs Benedict that cost more than my weekly grocery budget used to be. I heard the chime of the door as they entered the office. I could hear the nervous energy in Tyrell's voice. He was talking too fast. He was trying to sound professional, but he sounded like a man with a gun to his head. We are here to see Ms. Perkins, Tyrell announced. We are closing on the Hayes property. They were led into a conference room. I heard the rustle of papers. I heard the heavy breathing of the investor, a man named Russo who sounded like he smoked 3 packs a day. All right, let's make this quick, Russo grunted. I have 3 other buys today. You have the power of attorney. Right here, Tyrell said, slapping the document onto the table. Signed by Roland Hayes himself just 2 nights ago. There was a pause. I imagined Ms. Perkins, the notary, picking up the paper. She was a woman O'Malley had worked with for 20 years. She was meticulous. She was the gatekeeper. I need to verify the signature against the identification card on file, Ms. Perkins said, her voice crisp and professional. There was a silence that stretched for a long, agonizing minute. I took a sip of coffee. I visualized the signature I had written on the floor with blood dripping down my face. The sharp angular R. The missing loop on the D. Mr. Hayes, Mrs. Perkins said slowly. This signature does not match our records. What Tyrell's voice rose an octave. That is impossible. I watched him sign it. It is his signature. He was just shaky. He is old. He is sick. Ms. Perkins was unmoved. I understand that, sir, but the variance is significant. The stroke patterns are completely different, and frankly, the document appears to have stains on it. Is that blood? Tyrell stuttered. He cut himself shaving. Look, just notarize it. It is him. I swear. I cannot notarize this, Ms. Perkins said, pushing the paper back. Without a matching signature or the principal present to confirm, I cannot validate this transfer of deed. This document is void. The sound of a chair being kicked back violently echoed through the speaker. You have got to be kidding me, Tyrell screamed. You stupid bureaucrat, just stamp the damn paper. We have a deal here. Russo, the investor, spoke up. His voice was low and dangerous. You told me the paperwork was clean, Hayes. I do not do messy deals. I do not do fraud. It is not fraud. Emily shrieked, her composure cracking. He signed it. We can get him to sign it again. Just give us an hour. I am walking, Russo said. Deal is off. Do not call me unless you have the deed in your hand and the old man standing next to you. I heard footsteps walking away, then a loud crash. Tyrell had thrown something, maybe a vase, against the wall. We are dead, he moaned. We are absolutely dead. They are going to kill me. Shut up, Emily hissed. We have to go to the facility. We have to go to Sunnyvale right now. We will make him sign another one. We will guide his hand this time. We will force him. Let's go. Viola said, her voice trembling. Hurry before the bank closes. I took off the headphones. I wiped my mouth with the linen napkin. They were panicked. They were desperate. And now they were rushing toward a hole that was already empty. I checked out of the Ritz-Carlton an hour later, but I did not leave the city. I moved to a smaller boutique hotel near the airport. I needed to be ready to move when the time came. But first I needed to hear the end of the story. Miller had followed them to Sunnyvale. He was parked in the lot listening with a parabolic microphone aimed at the front entrance. The audio feed crackled to life again. I heard the screech of tires as Tyrell's car skidded into the lot. Car doors slammed. They were running. They burst into the lobby of the nursing home. We need to see Roland Hayes, Tyrell shouted. He was admitted yesterday, room 104. I heard the receptionist gasp. You cannot go back there, sir. Visiting hours are not until 2. I do not care about visiting hours, Tyrell yelled. I am his son. I need to see him now. It is a legal emergency. Then a new voice entered the fray. It was the administrator, the sweaty man from yesterday. He sounded terrified. Mr. Hayes, please lower your voice. There has been a situation. What situation? Emily demanded. Where is he? The administrator stammered. He is gone. Gone, Tyrell repeated. What do you mean, gone? Did he die? No, nothing like that, the administrator said quickly. He was discharged. About 2 hours after you dropped him off. Discharged? Viola screamed. By who? We are his guardians. We are the only ones who can discharge him. Well, actually, the administrator said, his voice dropping to a whisper. That is not what the court order said. A lawyer came. A Mr. O'Malley. He had a judge's order stating that your admission paperwork was fraudulent. He had police with him. Police, Emily whispered. Yes, police. They declared the facility a crime scene. They took Mr. Hayes. They said he was being released into the custody of his lawful legal guardian, who Tyrell demanded, who is his guardian. I do not know, the administrator said. The lawyer did not say. He just took him. Mr. Hayes, listen to me. You need to leave. The investigators are still here interviewing staff. If they see you, see. The silence that followed was heavy with absolute terror. They were not just broke now, they were exposed. The police were involved. Their victim had vanished into thin air. Where is he? Viola whispered. Her voice was shaking so hard it vibrated in my ear. Where did he go? Is he dead? Did they take him to the morgue? He is not dead, Mom Tyrell said, his voice sounding hollow. He is out there. He knows. He knows everything. What do we do? Emily asked. She sounded small, like a child. We run, Tyrell said. We go home, we pack, and we run, before the loan sharks find us, before the cops find us. I turned off the feed. I sat on the edge of the hotel bed. They were running scared. They were looking over their shoulders. For the first time in their lives, they were feeling the kind of helplessness they had inflicted on me. I picked up my phone. I dialed O'Malley. They took the bait, I said. Good, O'Malley replied. The title company flagged the attempt as fraud just as we planned. The nursing home has already given a statement to the police implicating Tyrell in the falsification of medical records. The trap is set, Roland. Now you just have to spring it. I will, I said. But not yet. Let them sweat for a few hours. Let them sit in that house and wonder where the hammer is going to fall. I hung up. I stood up and walked to the mirror. I adjusted my tie. I looked like a man of means. I looked like a man who owned a ranch in Montana and a gas empire. I did not look like a victim. I packed my bag. I had a plane to catch. The final act of this play wasn't going to happen in Chicago. It was going to happen on my terms, on my land. But first, I had to become the ghost they feared. I had to let them think I was gone forever before I came back to haunt them. I left the hotel and headed for Overheard. As the plane took off, banking over the gray sprawl of Chicago, I looked down. Somewhere down there in that maze of streets, 3 people were trembling in a house that no longer belonged to them. They were waiting for a knock on the door. They were waiting for justice. And justice was coming, but it was taking the scenic route. While my son was hyperventilating in a Chicago parking lot, terrified of a loan shark who wanted his fingers, I was reclining in a leather seat at 30,000 feet, sipping sparkling water with a slice of lime. The flight attendant asked if I needed a warm towel. I told her yes. I wiped my face, and with it, I wiped away the grime of the last 40 years. I was flying first class to Montana. I had left my phone off. I did not need to hear their panic. I could imagine it perfectly. Viola would be pacing the kitchen floor, praying to a god she only remembered when she needed money. Emily would be packing her bags, trying to figure out which credit card still had $10 of limit left. Tyrell would be staring at his hands, wondering how he was going to explain to the syndicate that the Golden Goose had flown the coop. I landed in Bozeman in the late afternoon. The air here was different. It was thin and sharp and smelled of pine needles and snow. I rented a truck. Not a beat-up Ford like the one I left in my driveway, but a brand-new GMC Denali with heated seats and an engine that purred like a jungle cat. I drove north, watching the mountains rise up on either side of the highway like jagged teeth biting into the blue sky. It was vast. It was empty. It was beautiful. I turned onto the dirt road marked Blackwood Ranch. The gate was massive wrought iron with the letter B twisted into the metal. I punched in the code O'Malley had given me. The gates swung open silently. I drove for 2 miles before I even saw the house. That was how big it was. 4,000 acres of timber and pasture. My brother Bernie had bought this land when it was nothing, and he had turned it into a fortress. The main house was a log cabin, but that word did not do it justice. It was a mansion made of timber and stone with a wraparound porch that looked out over a valley that turned purple in the twilight. I parked the truck and stepped out. The silence was absolute. No sirens, no shouting neighbors, no wife complaining about the draft. Just the wind in the trees and the call of a hawk circling overhead. I walked up the steps and unlocked the front door. Inside it smelled of cedar and old leather. It was furnished simply but expensively. There was a fireplace big enough to roast a pig in. Above the mantel hung a painting of Bernie. He looked like me, but harder. His eyes followed me as I walked into the room. "Hello, brother," I whispered. "Thank you." I slept that night in a king-sized bed with sheets that felt like silk. I did not dream of Tyrell. I did not dream of the nursing home. I dreamed of running through the woods, my lungs full of clean air, my legs strong and young again. The next morning a car pulled up the drive. It was a local attorney named Mritton, who O'Malley had coordinated with. He was a tall man with a cowboy hat and a briefcase. He shook my hand with a grip that could crush walnuts. "Welcome home, Mr. Hayes," he said. "O'Malley told me you were coming. We have some business to discuss." We sat at the heavy oak dining table. Mr. Britton opened his briefcase and pulled out a stack of maps and geological surveys. "Your brother was a smart man," Mr. Hayes Britton said. "He bought this land for the timber, but he kept it for what was underneath." Underneath, I asked, pouring coffee from a silver pot. "Yes, sir," Britton said, tapping a map colored in shades of red and orange. "Shale. Massive deposits. The Bakken Formation extends right under your south pasture." I looked at the map. I knew about shale gas. I read the news, but I did not understand what it meant for me. "Is it worth something?" I asked. Britton laughed, a dry, hearty sound. "Worth something. Mr. Hayes, 3 energy companies have been in a bidding war for the extraction rights for 6 months. Bernie was holding out for the best royalty percentage. He got it right before he passed. He slid a contract across the table. It was thick, bound in blue paper. "This is the lease agreement," Britton explained. "They pay a signing bonus of $500,000 immediately, but the real money is in the royalties. Based on the projected output, you are looking at a passive income check every single month." "How much?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Conservative estimates put it at $150,000 a month," Britton said casually. "Once they get the rigs fully operational, it could be double that." I sat back in my chair. The breath left my body. $150,000 a month. I did the math in my head. That was nearly $2 million a year, for doing nothing, for just owning the dirt under my feet. The $1 million cash Bernie left me was just the appetizer. This was the main course. This was generational wealth. This was the kind of money that built libraries and named hospitals. This was power. And my son wanted to put me in a state home to sell a house worth $300,000. The stupidity of it was almost as staggering as the cruelty. If he had just been a good son, if he had just been decent, he would have shared in all of this. he would have been the heir to an empire. Instead, he was a thief stealing copper wire while standing on a gold mine. I picked up the pen. It was a heavy fountain pen that Bernie must have used. "Where do I sign?" I asked. Britton pointed to the line. I signed Roland Hayes. This time I used my real signature with the loop on the D and the flourish on the R. It flowed onto the paper like black silk. "Congratulations, Mr. Hayes," Britton said, shaking my hand again. "You are a very wealthy man." I walked Britton to his car. After he left, I stood on the porch and looked at my land. My land. The ground beneath my feet was pumping money into my bank account right now. I felt a shift inside me, a physical realignment of my spine. The stoop was gone. The hesitation was gone. The man who apologized for existing was gone. I went back inside and went into the master bathroom. I looked in the mirror. I saw an old man with gray stubble and tired eyes wearing a flannel shirt that had a fraying collar. "No," I said aloud. "Not anymore." I drove into town. Bozeman was not Chicago, but it had money. I found a high-end men's clothier on Main Street. I walked in. The sales clerk, a young woman, looked at my boots and my flannel. "Can I help you, sir?" she asked, her tone polite but guarded. "Yes," I said. "I need a suit. I need everything, actually. Shoes, shirts, ties, and I need a barber." She hesitated for a second. "We operate by appointment usually, and our suits start at $2,000. I pulled out the debit card connected to the account where the signing bonus had just been wired. "I do not have an appointment," I said. "But I have this, and I do not care what it costs. I want to look like the owner of Blackwood Ranch." Her attitude changed instantly. 30 minutes later, I was sitting in a leather barber chair getting a hot towel shave. The barber trimmed my hair close and neat. He shaped my beard into a distinguished gray line. He massaged my scalp with oils that smelled of sandalwood. Then came the clothes. I tried on a charcoal gray suit made of Italian wool. It fit me like a second skin. I put on a crisp white shirt with French cuffs and silver cufflinks. I stepped into hand-stitched leather Oxfords that cost more than my first car. I stood in front of the three-way mirror in the dressing room. The man staring back at me was a stranger. He stood tall. His shoulders were broad. His eyes were sharp and commanding. He looked like a CEO. He looked like a patriarch. He looked dangerous. Roland, the warehouse manager, was dead. Roland, the victim, was buried in a pauper's grave in my mind. The man in the mirror was Mr. Hayes, and Mr. Hayes had some unfinished business to attend to. I paid the bill without blinking. I wore the suit out of the store. I walked down the street and people moved out of my way. They nodded at me with respect. They did not see a confused old man. They saw power. I got back into my truck. I checked my phone. It was time. I had let them sweat for 48 hours. I had let them run and hide and turn on each other. Now it was time to drop the hammer. I dialed the number for the Ritz-Carlton in Chicago. I asked for the concierge. "This is Roland Hayes," I said, my voice deep and authoritative. "I need to book the presidential suite again, for tonight. And I need you to arrange a car to pick me up from O'Hare. I am coming back to clean house." I drove to the airport. I was flying back into the storm, but this time I was the one bringing the lightning. They wanted to declare me incompetent. I was going to show them exactly how competent I was. I was going to show them what happens when you wake a sleeping giant and try to steal his blanket. Chicago was waiting, and so was my revenge. While I was sipping a 30-year-old scotch in a room that cost $5,000 a night, my family was experiencing a very different kind of evening. I watched it all unfold on the screen of my burner phone. The loan sharks had finally lost patience. They did not knock this time. 2 men in leather jackets kicked in the front door of my house, splintering the frame I had painted every summer for 20 years. They did not stay long. They did not need to. They smashed the flat-screen television. They overturned the dining table where we had eaten that miserable dinner just days ago. They threw a brick through the living room window, letting the cold Chicago wind howl through the house. Tyrell was huddled in the corner of the kitchen, weeping like a child. He was holding his hand to his chest, cradling his fingers as if they were already gone. The men had not cut him yet, but they had promised to return at midnight. They had given him a deadline measured in hours, not days. 1 finger for every $1,000 unpaid. Tyrell did not have enough fingers to pay that debt. Viola sat amidst the wreckage of her living room, rocking back and forth on the floor. Her vanity was gone. Her hair was a mess, her makeup streaked with tears. She was muttering prayers to a god she had ignored while plotting my demise. She was useless. She was broken. She was a woman who had built her house on sand and was shocked when the tide came in. But it was Emily who caught my attention. She was not crying. She was not praying. She was in the bedroom, my bedroom, the one they had kicked me out of. She was pulling a suitcase from under the bed. She was moving with the frantic efficiency of a rat fleeing a sinking ship. I watched her on the hidden camera as she rifled through drawers, grabbing anything that looked valuable. She took Viola's jewelry box. She took the silverware from the dining room cabinet when the men were not looking. She was not planning to help her husband pay his debt. She was planning to disappear. She was going to leave Tyrell to the wolves and Viola to the cold. I watched her zip up the bag. She checked her phone, probably looking for a flight or a bus out of town. She looked at the door, calculating her exit. She was going to sneak out the back while Tyrell and Viola were distracted by their terror. It was cold. It was ruthless. It was exactly what I expected from her. I sat back in the leather chair of the presidential suite. The glass of scotch felt heavy in my hand. I had them. I had them exactly where I wanted them. They were terrified, desperate, and turning on each other. It was time to throw them a lifeline that was actually a noose. I reached for the hotel phone. It was a heavy, cream-colored device with gold accents. I dialed the number of my house, the landline, the one number I knew they would answer because they were terrified it was the police or the hospital calling to tell them I was dead. I watched on the screen as the phone rang in the kitchen. It shrilled loudly, cutting through the sound of Viola's sobbing. Tyrell jumped as if he had been shot. He looked at the phone with terror. He shook his head frantically at Viola, mouthing the word no. He thought it was the loan sharks calling to taunt him. Viola stared at the phone. It rang again and again. Finally, her instinct to answer overcame her fear. She crawled across the floor and reached up to the counter. She pulled the receiver down, her hand trembling so badly she almost dropped it. "Hello," she whispered. Her voice was a broken rasp. "Hello, Viola," I said. My voice was not the shaky whisper of the senile old man they had sent away. It was deep. It was resonant. It was the voice of the man who had commanded warehouse floors and negotiated contracts. It was the voice of Roland Hayes. Viola froze. Her eyes went wide. She stopped breathing. She looked at the phone as if it were possessed. "Roland," she gasped. "Is that you?" "Who else would it be?" I asked calmly. "Where are you?" she screamed. Her voice cracked with hysteria. "Tyrell, get in here. It is your father. He is alive." Tyrell scrambled into the kitchen. He grabbed the phone from her, pressing it to his ear. He looked like a drowning man clutching at a straw. "Dad," he yelled. "Dad, where are you? The police said you were gone. They said you disappeared. Are you okay?" I took a slow sip of my drink, savoring the burn. "I am better than okay, Tyrell," I said. "I am fantastic. I am sitting in the presidential suite at the Ritz-Carlton downtown. The view is incredible. You can see the whole city from here, even the parts where people lose their fingers for making bad bets." Tyrell went pale. He leaned against the counter for support. "The Ritz," he stammered. "How? How did you get there? Who paid for it?" "Does it matter?" I asked. "What matters is that I have a pen in my hand, Tyrell, and I am ready to sign." "Sign," Tyrell repeated. "Sign what?" "The deed I said, the power of attorney, whatever scraps of paper you need to save your skin. I know about your friends, Tyrell. I know they just left. I know they are coming back at midnight, and I know you do not have the money." Tyrell began to sob. It was a pathetic sound. "Dad, please," he begged. "You have to help me. They are going to kill me. I did not mean for any of this to happen. Just come home. Please come home and sign the papers." "I am not coming to that house," I said, my voice hardening. "That house is a crime scene. If you want my signature, you come to me. Bring the papers. Bring the notary if you have to. Bring Viola. Bring Emily. I want the whole family together for this." Yes, okay," Tyrell stuttered. "We are coming. We will be there in 20 minutes. Just stay there, Dad. Do not move. Please, do not move." "Room 402, I said. "The penthouse. Tell the concierge you are here to see Mr. Hayes." And Tyrell, "Yes, Dad. Do not make me wait. I have a very busy schedule." I hung up. I watched on the screen as Tyrell dropped the phone. He turned to Viola and Emily, who had appeared in the doorway dragging her suitcase. "He is at the Ritz," Tyrell shouted. "He is alive. He wants to sign. He is going to save us." Emily dropped her suitcase. Her eyes narrowed. "The Ritz," she said. "How can he afford the Ritz? He does not have a dime. Who cares? Tyrell screamed, grabbing her arm. Maybe he stole a credit card. Maybe he is bluffing. It does not matter. He said he would sign. That is all that matters. We get the signature, we sell the house to the sharks, we pay the debt. We survive. Emily looked at the suitcase, then at Tyrell. She did the math. Running was risky. She had no money and nowhere to go. If the old man signed, they could pay off the debt and maybe have enough left over for her to leave properly later. Greed won out over fear. Fine, she said. Let us go. But if this is a trick, I am leaving you, Tyrell. I swear I am leaving you. They scrambled. It was a chaotic frenzy of motion. Tyrell grabbed the crumpled papers from the table stained with beer in desperation. Viola tried to fix her hair, wiping the mascara from her cheeks with a dirty dish rag. Emily grabbed her purse, checking to make sure her fake ID was still there. They rushed out the door, leaving it hanging open on its broken hinges. They ran to Tyrell's car, which was parked on the lawn because the driveway was full of broken glass. The engine coughed and sputtered before roaring to life. They peeled out of the yard tires, spinning on the wet grass, desperate to reach the man they had discarded like trash. They thought I was scared. They thought I had escaped the nursing home and panicked, checking into a hotel with a stolen card just to buy time. They thought I was calling them because I needed them to save me from the consequences of my own escape. They had no idea that I was the one pulling the strings. I stood up and walked to the mirror. I checked my tie. I smoothed the lapels of my Italian suit. I looked like a king. I looked like justice. I walked over to the door of the suite and unlocked it. I wanted them to walk right in. I wanted them to see the luxury. I wanted them to smell the money. 20 minutes later, my phone buzzed. It was the concierge. "Mr. Hayes," he said, his voice polite but strained. "There are 3 individuals here to see you. They claim to be your family. They are a bit distressed." "Shall I send them up?" "Send them up," I said. "And send up another bottle of champagne. The expensive stuff this time. We have a celebration to attend to." I hung up. I walked to the center of the room. I sat down in the high-backed leather chair facing the door. I crossed my legs. I clasped my hands over my knee. I waited. I heard the elevator ding down the hall. I heard the muffled sound of running footsteps on the thick carpet. They were running. They were running toward their salvation. They burst through the door without knocking. They stopped dead in their tracks. The sight that greeted them must have been like a hallucination. They were standing in a room that was larger than our entire house. The ceilings were high adorned with crystal chandeliers. The windows stretched from floor to ceiling, revealing the glittering skyline of Chicago. And in the center of it all sat the old man they had thrown away. But I was not the man they knew. I was clean-shaven. My hair was trimmed. I was wearing a charcoal gray suit that shimmered under the lights. My shoes were polished to a mirror shine. I held a glass of amber liquid that cost more than their car. They looked like wrecks. Tyrell's shirt was torn and stained. His eye was swollen shut. He smelled of fear and sweat. Viola's dress was wrinkled and she was wearing slippers. Emily's makeup was smeared and her blazer was missing a button. They were the picture of desperation standing in a temple of wealth. "Dad," Tyrell breathed. His eyes darted around the room, taking in the opulence. What is this?" I smiled. It was not a warm smile. It was the smile of a shark who has just found a seal in open water. "Hello, family," I said. "Come in. Close the door. You are letting the air conditioning out." They stepped inside, moving slowly as if afraid the floor might open up beneath them. Emily was staring at my suit. Her eyes were wide. She knew fabric. She knew money. She realized in that second that something was terribly, terribly wrong. "Roland," Viola whispered. "Where did you get this? Did you steal it?" I laughed. A dry, humorless sound. "Steal it, Viola. I do not need to steal. I am Roland Hayes. I own this room. I own this suit. And right now I own you." "Just sign the papers," Dad Tyrell interrupted, thrusting the crumpled documents toward me. "We do not have time for this. The sharks are coming. Just sign and we can go." I looked at the papers in his shaking hand. I looked at my son. I stood up slowly, unfolding my height until I towered over him. "Put them on the table, Tyrell," I commanded. He dropped them on the coffee table next to the crystal vase of fresh orchids. He looked at me pleadingly. "Please, Dad," he whimpered. "Just sign." I walked over to the table. I picked up the papers. I looked at them. Then I looked at Tyrell. "I am not going to sign these, Tyrell," I said softly. "What?" he screamed. "You said you would. You called us. You said to bring them." "I said bring them," I corrected. "I did not say I would sign them. I wanted you here so I could show you something." I reached into the inside pocket of my jacket. Tyrell flinched, thinking I was reaching for a weapon. In a way, I was. I pulled out a stack of photographs. They were high-resolution, glossy prints taken by Miller over the last week. I tossed them onto the table, fanning them out like a winning poker hand. "Look," I said. They looked. The first photo showed Emily. She was sitting in a booth at a dive bar. Her hand was resting on the arm of a man, a large man with tattoos on his neck. He was leaning in, whispering in her ear. He was smiling. Tyrell frowned. "Who is that?" he asked, looking at Emily. Emily went white. That is nobody," she stammered. "Just a client." I tossed another photo. This one showed Emily and the man kissing. It was not a friendly kiss. It was passionate. It was intimate. "That man Tyrell," I said, my voice cold as Marcus King. "The head of the King Syndicate. The man you owe $200,000 to." Tyrell looked from the photo to Emily. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. "And this one," I said, throwing down a third photo. This one showed Emily handing Marcus a thick envelope, an envelope that looked exactly like the one Tyrell had given Dr. Vance. "She has been paying him," I said. "She has been paying him with the money you stole from me." "But she was not paying off your debt, son. She was paying him to keep the pressure on. She was paying him to threaten you." What Tyrell whispered. "She cut a deal, Tyrell," I explained. "She gets the house. She sells it. She splits the profit with Marcus. And you get nothing. You take the fall. You lose the finger. She walks away with the cash and the boyfriend." "Liar." Emily screamed, lunging for the photos. "He is lying, Tyrell. He is crazy. The doctor said he is crazy. Do not listen to him." Tyrell grabbed her wrist. He looked at her. He looked at the fear in her eyes. He saw the truth. You know him," he stuttered. "You know the shark." "I know him," Emily spat, trying to pull away. "I know him better than I know you. You are a loser, Tyrell. You were always a loser." I needed a way out. The room exploded. Tyrell roared, a sound of pure animal rage. He tackled Emily. They crashed into the coffee table, sending the orchids in the crystal vase shattering to the floor. Viola screamed, covering her mouth. I watched them. I watched my family destroy itself. I took another sip of my scotch. I did not intervene. I did not call for help. I just watched. This was the justice I had paid for, and it was worth every penny. The heavy double doors of the presidential suite swung open with a hush that screamed money. I sat in the center of the room on a high-backed leather chair that felt like a throne. In my hand, I held a glass of 50-year-old whiskey that glowed amber under the crystal chandelier. I took a slow, deliberate sip, letting the liquid burn pleasantly in my throat while I waited for my guests to process their surroundings. They stood in the entryway, bunched together like frightened cattle. They looked filthy. Tyrell's shirt was torn and stained with sweat. Viola was wearing house slippers that were caked with mud from the yard. Emily's makeup was smeared down her cheeks, making her look like a melting clown. They stared at the floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a panoramic view of the Chicago skyline, a view that belonged to winners, not to people who owed money to loan sharks. Emily was the first to look at me. Her eyes traveled up from my polished Italian leather shoes past the sharp crease of my charcoal trousers to the silk lapel of my custom-tailored jacket. I saw her pupils dilate. She knew fashion. She knew labels. She knew that the suit I was wearing cost more than the car she drove. She realized in that split second that the power dynamic had shifted violently. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. Tyrell, however, was too stupid and too terrified to notice the clothes. He only saw his father. He only saw the object he needed to manipulate. He lunged forward, stumbling on the thick carpet. "Where the hell have you been?" he screamed, his voice cracking with hysteria. "We have been looking everywhere for you. Do you have any idea what you have done?" He slammed the crumpled power of attorney documents onto the coffee table, knocking over a crystal vase. Water spilled onto the marble surface, but I did not flinch. "Sign it," he demanded, pointing a shaking finger at the paper. "Sign it right now, Dad. I do not have time for your games. They are coming back at midnight." I looked at him. I looked at the boy I had raised, the man who was willing to sell me down the river for a gambling debt. I did not feel anger anymore. I felt nothing. I set my glass down on the side table with a soft clink. I did not reach for the pen. Instead, I reached into the inside pocket of my jacket. Tyrell flinched. He thought I was pulling a gun. In a way, I was. I pulled out a thick envelope. I tossed it onto the wet table right on top of the unsigned legal documents. The envelope slid across the water and stopped in front of Tyrell. "Open it," I said. My voice was calm, low, and commanded absolute obedience. Tyrell looked at the envelope. He looked at me. His hands were shaking so badly he tore the paper as he tried to open it. A stack of high-resolution photographs spilled out. They were brutal. They were clear. They were undeniable. The first photo showed Emily sitting at a bar. She was laughing, her hand resting on the forearm of a large man with a neck tattoo. The man was Marcus King, the head of the syndicate, the very man Tyrell owed $200,000 to. Tyrell frowned. He picked up the photo, holding it close to his face. "Who is that?" he asked, confusion warring with panic. "Keep looking," I said. He shuffled to the next photo. It showed Emily and Marcus King kissing. It was not a friendly peck. It was deep. It was intimate. It was the kiss of two people who had been sharing a bed for a long time. Tyrell made a sound like a wounded animal. He dropped the photo as if it had burned him. He looked at Emily. "Emily," he whispered, "why are you kissing him? Why are you kissing the shark?" Emily went pale. Her eyes darted around the room, looking for an exit, looking for an excuse. "That is not what it looks like," she stammered. "It is an old photo, Tyrell. It is from before." I leaned forward. "It is time stamped, Emily," I said. "That photo was taken 3 days ago. While Tyrell was begging me for money, you were sleeping with the man who threatened to cut off his fingers." Tyrell turned to her, his face twisted into a mask of pure betrayal. "You know him," he said, his voice rising. "You know Marcus King." I tossed the final photo onto the pile. It showed Emily handing a thick envelope of cash to Marcus. "She has been paying him, Tyrell," I explained mercilessly. "She has been taking the money you stole from me, the money you scraped together, and she has been giving it to her boyfriend. But she was not paying down your debt. She was paying him to keep scaring you. She was paying him to pressure you into selling my house." "It is a lie," Emily shrieked. "He is lying, Tyrell. He is senile. He doctored the photos." Tyrell looked at the photos. He looked at his wife. He saw the guilt written all over her face. He saw the cold calculation in her eyes that she could not hide fast enough. "You sold me out," he whispered. "You were going to let them hurt me. I was going to save myself." Emily spat, dropping the act. "You are a loser, Tyrell. You have always been a loser. Marcus is a real man. He knows how to make money. You just know how to lose it," Tyrell roared. He raised his hand, the same hand he had used to strike me. But before he could move, I pressed a button on the remote control in my hand. The room was suddenly filled with sound. The high-fidelity surround sound system of the presidential suite roared to life. It was not music. It was a recording. It was the recording I had made with the spy cameras in my own kitchen. The quality was crystal clear. Every word was sharp as a razor. Viola's voice filled the room, amplified to a deafening volume. "He is useless to us now anyway. All he does is eat and take up space, sell the house and dump him in the state facility." Viola covered her mouth with her hands, her eyes wide with horror. She heard her own cruelty broadcast back to her. Then came Tyrell's voice, whining and pathetic. "I just wish he would die already. Why does he have to be so healthy? If he just had a heart attack, we would get the insurance and the house. It would solve everything." Tyrell froze. He looked at the speakers, then at me. He looked small. He looked like a bug under a magnifying glass. And finally, Emily's voice, cool and venomous. "Once we sell the house and put him away, I am filing for divorce, Tyrell. I am taking my half and I am leaving. I am not staying married to a man who cannot even handle his own father." The recording ended. The silence that followed was heavier than the noise. The truth hung in the air, stripping them naked. They stood there exposed in their greed and their hatred. I stood up. I buttoned my jacket. I walked over to the table and picked up the unsigned power of attorney. I ripped it in half, slowly letting the sound of tearing paper punctuate the moment. Then I ripped it again and let the pieces flutter to the floor. You wanted me gone, I said, my voice filling the room. You wanted my money. You wanted my house. Well, you got your wish. I am gone. The Roland you knew is dead. You killed him. I walked past them toward the door. They were too stunned to move. They were paralyzed by the wreckage of their own lives. The house is legally sealed, I said, stopping at the door. I called the police an hour ago. I reported the assault Tyrell. I gave them the medical report of my injuries, and I reported the attempted poisoning Viola. The lab results came back this morning. The pills you gave me were arsenic-based rat poison, not sedatives. Viola gasped. She fell to her knees. No, Roland, she sobbed. I did not know. Emily gave them to me. She said they were sleeping pills. I did not care. I opened the door. Police are on their way up, I said. Enjoy the view while you can. It is the last luxury you will see for a very long time. I walked out into the hallway and let the heavy door click shut behind me, sealing them in with their sins. I walked to the elevator, feeling lighter with every step. The burden was gone. The trash was taken out. I was free. The silence that followed the recording did not last long because it was shattered by a sound I had never heard from my son before. It was a guttural roar of pure animalistic betrayal. Tyrell did not look at me. He did not look at his mother. He looked at Emily. He looked at the woman who had whispered poison in his ear for 3 years. The woman who had promised him easy money and a quick fix. The woman who was currently sleeping with the man who wanted to cut off his fingers. He lunged across the coffee table, scattering the photos of her infidelity like confetti. His hands found her throat before she could even scream. They crashed backward onto the expensive Persian rug. Emily clawed at his face, her nails digging red furrows into his cheeks, but Tyrell did not seem to feel it. He was blind with rage. He was squeezing the life out of his wife, trying to crush the lies back down her throat. Viola screamed. She threw herself onto Tyrell, beating her fists against his back, begging him to stop. She pulled at his shirt, her voice rising to a hysterical shriek that surely penetrated the thick walls of the suite. "Tyrell, stop it! You are killing her!" she wailed. But Tyrell was gone. He was lost in the red haze of a man who realizes he is the fool in his own tragedy. I sat in my leather chair and I watched. I took a slow sip of my whiskey, letting the peat and smoke coat my tongue. I did not stand up. I did not reach for the phone to call security. I did not shout commands. I simply observed the violence of their implosion. It was a chaotic ballet of consequences. They were tearing each other apart, consuming themselves in the fire of their own greed. Just as Emily's face began to turn a terrifying shade of purple, the heavy double doors of the suite burst open again. This time it was not room service. 4 uniformed officers from the Chicago Police Department flooded into the room, their weapons drawn but lowered. Behind them walked 2 detectives in plain clothes, followed closely by Mr. O'Malley, who looked as calm as if he were attending a board meeting. "Police, get off her," one of the officers shouted. Tyrell did not let go. He was too far gone. 2 officers grabbed him by the shoulders and hauled him backward, breaking his grip with forceful efficiency. Emily gasped for air, coughing and retching, clutching her bruised throat. Tyrell thrashed in the officer's grip, screaming obscenities at his wife, screaming that she had set him up, that she had ruined everything. They slammed him face first against the wall, cuffing his hands behind his back with the metallic click of finality. I remained seated. Detective Miller walked over to me. He looked at the chaos, then at me, sitting calmly with my drink. "Mr. Hayes," he asked. "I am Roland Hayes," I confirmed, setting my glass down. "Thank you for coming, Detective. I believe you have some business with these people." Miller nodded. He turned to Tyrell, who was panting against the wall, his face pressed into the silk wallpaper. "Tyrell Hayes, you are under arrest," Miller stated, his voice cutting through the noise. "You are charged with the aggravated assault of an elderly person based on the medical evidence provided by your father this morning. You are also charged with financial fraud, attempted grand larceny, and conspiracy to commit forgery." Tyrell twisted his head, trying to look at me. His eyes were wide with shock. "Assault," he sputtered. "I did not mean to. It was an accident. He fell. The medical examiner says the laceration on his temple and the bruising pattern are consistent with a strike and a fall," Miller corrected him. "And we have the video from the pawn shop where you tried to sell his watch. We also have the testimony of Dr. Vance." Tyrell went rigid. "Vance, he whispered. "We picked up Dr. Vance 2 hours ago," Miller said with a grim smile. He was very eager to make a deal. "He told us everything, Tyrell. He told us about the $5,000 you paid him to falsify medical records. He told us about the plan to have your father committed. He gave us the texts. He gave us the dates. He gave us you." Tyrell sagged. His legs gave out, and the officers had to hold him up. He looked at me. He looked at the father he had tried to bury. Tears streamed down his face, mixing with the blood from Emily's scratches. "Dad," he sobbed. "Dad, please, tell them it is a mistake. I am your son. You cannot let them take me to jail. I will die in there. The sharks will get me. Help me, Dad, please." I looked at him. I looked at the man who had raised his hand against me just 24 hours ago. I looked at the man who had called me useless. I felt a flicker of the old instinct, the urge to protect the boy I had taught to ride a bike. But then I looked at the bandage on my head in the reflection of the window. I remembered the cold, damp room at Sunnyvale. I remembered the fear. I stood up and walked over to him. I stood inches from his face. "I do not have a son," I said, my voice low and steady. "My son died the day he decided his father was nothing more than a paycheck. You are just a stranger who broke into my house and hurt me." "No, Dad." "No," Tyrell wailed as the officers began to drag him toward the door. "Take him away," I said, turning my back on him. "I am done with him." They dragged him out. His screams echoing down the hallway until the elevator doors slid shut, cutting off his pleas. Viola collapsed onto the sofa, weeping into her hands, her world completely destroyed. But we were not finished. Detective Miller turned his attention to Emily. She was sitting on the floor, rubbing her throat, her makeup smeared into a mask of tragedy. She looked up at the detective, her eyes narrowing. She thought she was safe. She thought she was just the victim of a domestic dispute. "Am I free to go?" she rasped, her voice hoarse. "My husband just tried to kill me. I need a doctor." "You will get a doctor," Miller said, pulling a second pair of handcuffs from his belt. "But you are not free to go, Mrs. Hayes." Emily froze. What she asked. "I did not hit him. I did not sign the papers. You have nothing on me." Miller laughed. It was a dry sound. "We have a lot more than you think. You are under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud and elder abuse, but that is the least of your problems. We also have a federal warrant for your arrest for wire fraud and bank fraud." Emily scrambled backward, scuttling across the rug like a crab. "Federal," she stammered. "That is ridiculous. I am a real estate agent." "You are a con artist," Miller corrected. "You co-signed a loan 2 years ago with a man named Marcus King. Does that name ring a bell? You used a false identity to secure a $100,000 line of credit for a shell company that does not exist. That loan defaulted last week." Emily went pale. "Marcus," she whispered. "We raided Marcus King's operation this morning," Miller said. "He had a ledger, Emily. He kept very good records of who owed him favors and who helped him launder money. When we put the cuffs on him, he gave us 3 names to reduce his sentence. Yours was the first one on the list. He sold you out to save 5 years off his own time." I watched the realization wash over her. The man she had betrayed her husband for the man she had been sleeping with to secure her safety had thrown her to the wolves without a second thought. She had played the game of sharks, and she had been eaten. "No," she screamed as Miller pulled her to her feet. "He loves me. He would not do that. He promised me. He promised you whatever he needed to get you to sign the papers," Miller said, snapping the cuffs onto her wrists. "You are just another loose end, Emily, and now you are tied up." She looked at me. Her eyes were full of venom. "This is your fault," she hissed. "You old devil. You should have just died. Why could you not just die?" I took a sip of my drink, watching her struggle. "Because I had work to do, Emily," I said. "I had to take out the trash." The officers hauled her out. She did not cry like Tyrell. She cursed. She screamed threats. She kicked at the doorframe. She went down fighting, but she went down all the same. She was a grifter who had finally met a mark she could not con. The door closed, leaving a sudden ringing silence in the massive suite. The air felt cleaner. The toxicity had been sucked out by the vacuum of justice. I looked around the room. The photos were still scattered on the floor. The power of attorney lay in pieces like snow. The crystal vase was broken, a puddle of water soaking into the rug. It was a mess, but it was a beautiful mess. It was the debris of a victory. I turned to the only person left. Viola. She was still sitting on the sofa, her head bowed, her shoulders shaking. She looked small. She looked old. She looked like a woman who had just realized she was alone in the universe. She slowly lifted her head. Her eyes were red-rimmed and swollen. She looked at me with a pathetic hope that made me sick. "Roland," she whispered. "Oh, Roland, it is finally over. They are gone. It is just us now, just you and me, like it used to be." I looked at her. I looked at the woman who had watched me bleed on the floor and told me to sign my life away so she could go back to sleep. I looked at the woman who had put sedatives in my food. I walked over to the desk where O'Malley had left a briefcase earlier in the evening. I opened it. I took out a single crisp document. It was not a check. It was not a deed. I walked back to Viola. I did not sit down. I stood over her. "It is not just us, Viola," I said, my voice devoid of warmth. "There is no us. There hasn't been an us for a long time. I just was too blind to see it." "Roland, please," she begged, reaching for my hand. I was scared. They made me do it. Emily and Tyrell, they pressured me. "I love you. I have always loved you." I pulled my hand away as if she were made of fire. "You love my brother's money," I said. "You love the idea of what I could give you, but you never loved me. If you loved me, you would have stopped them. If you loved me, you would have visited me in that hellhole. If you loved me, you would not have looked at me like garbage for 40 years. I dropped the document into her lap. "What is this?" she asked, looking down at it through her tears. "It is divorce papers," I said. "And an eviction notice." "Eviction," she gasped. "But that is my house." "It is my house," I corrected. "I bought it before we were married. The deed is in my name. And since you conspired to harm me physically and financially, you have violated every vow you ever took. O'Malley made sure of it. You have no claim to the ranch. You have no claim to the inheritance. And as of this moment, you have no claim to the house on 4th Street. "Where will I go?" she cried. "I have nowhere. I have no money." I looked at her. I remembered the soup she spilled on the floor. I remembered the way she dismissed my pain. "You can go to the state facility," I said. "I hear they have a bed open in room 104. It is not the Ritz, but it is secure." I turned my back on her. I walked to the window and looked out at the city lights. "Get out, Viola," I said. "Get out before I have the police come back and arrest you as an accomplice." I heard her sobbing. I heard her struggle to her feet. I heard the door open and close one last time, and then finally there was silence. Absolute pure silence. I was alone. But for the first time in my life, I was not lonely. I was free. The early morning sun poured through the massive windows of the Blackwood Ranch main house, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air, but the warmth didn't reach the cold knot in my stomach as I stared at my phone. It buzzed again, vibrating against the rough-hewn timber table. "Incoming call, State Correctional Facility." It was Tyrell. 3 years. It had been 3 years since I watched the bailiffs drag him out of that Chicago courtroom, his pleas for mercy echoing off the sterile walls. 3 years since I walked away from the wreckage of my old life, leaving behind the house on 4th Street, the betrayal, and the woman who had promised to love me until death but tried to hasten the process. I picked up the phone, feeling the weight of it in my calloused hand. My thumb hovered over the screen. I knew what this call was. He was up for parole soon. He had likely exhausted his appeals, his excuses, and his commissary fund. Now he was reaching out to the only lifeline he thought he had left. He wanted to hear my voice. He wanted to say he was sorry. He wanted to ask if there was room for him here in this paradise I had built from the ashes of his greed. I looked out the window. Down in the valley, the Hayes Center was waking up. I could see the smoke rising from the forge, hear the distant hum of machinery. 15 young men were down there, boys who had started with nothing but anger and bad luck, now learning to weld, to build, to fix. They were good kids. They worked hard. They respected the tools and the trade. They were the sons I had chosen, the legacy I was building. Tyrell. Tyrell had chosen his path. He had chosen the easy way, the gamble, the lie. He had chosen to raise his hand against his father. He had chosen to look at me and see only a dollar sign. The phone stopped buzzing. The screen went dark. Then it lit up again. He was persistent. He had always been persistent when he wanted something for free. I remembered the night of the storm. I remembered the blood dripping onto my pajamas. I remembered Viola standing there cold and indifferent. I remembered Emily's sneer. I pressed the red button. Decline. Then with a steady hand, I opened the settings menu. I found the number. I scrolled down to the bottom. Block caller. I tapped it. A small pop-up asked for confirmation. Block contact. I didn't hesitate. I pressed block. I set the phone back down on the table face down. The silence of the ranch rushed back in, filling the space where the buzzing had been. It was a heavy silence, but it wasn't empty. It was full of peace. It was full of the wind in the pines and the call of a hawk circling high above the tree line. I picked up my coffee mug. The ceramic was warm against my palms. I took a slow sip. The coffee was strong, black, and bitter just the way I liked it. I wasn't angry anymore. The rage that had fueled me through those dark days in Chicago, the fire that had driven me to expose them and bring them to justice, had burned itself out. What was left was something cleaner, harder. It was clarity. I had cut out the cancer. It had been painful. It had left a scar, but the tissue around it was healing. The body was strong again. I stood up and walked to the edge of the porch. The air was crisp, smelling of pine needles and damp earth. Below the valley stretched out green and vibrant. I saw one of the students, a kid named Marcus from Detroit, walking toward the garage with a toolbox in his hand. He walked with his head up, his shoulders back. He looked like a man who knew where he was going. I smiled. I wasn't lonely. I wasn't a victim. I wasn't a burden. I was Roland Hayes. I was 71 years old. I was the owner of Blackwood Ranch. And I had a lot of work to do. The sun cleared the mountain peaks, flooding the valley with golden light. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the clean, cold air of Montana. I turned my back on the phone and walked down the steps toward the center. The past was dead. The future was waiting, and it looked bright. The gavel fell with a sound like a heavy door slamming shut forever. 5 years in state prison. That was the price of Tyrell's betrayal. I watched from the back of the courtroom as the bailiffs cuffed his hands behind his back. He looked back at me one last time, his eyes pleading for a father who no longer existed. I did not look away, but I did not offer him any comfort either. I simply stood up and buttoned my jacket, turning my back on the son who had tried to bury me. Emily did not even make it to trial. She posted bail with money she likely stole from another source and vanished into the wind. The police said she was likely in Mexico or Canada running from federal charges and the dangerous men she owed money to. She would spend the rest of her life looking over her shoulder, wondering when the debt collectors would catch up. It was a prison without walls, but it was a prison nonetheless. And Viola, my wife of 40 years, found herself living the simple life she had always claimed to want. But it was not in a cozy cottage. It was in a damp studio apartment paid for by state assistants. I heard she got a job washing dishes at a diner on 47th Street. Her manicured hands were now raw from hot water and cheap soap. She spent her days scrubbing grease off plates just as she had tried to scrub me out of her life. I did not visit her. I did not send her money. I let her live with the consequences of her choices. I left Chicago the next day. I drove my truck west, watching the skyline fade in the rearview mirror until it was just a smudge of gray against the horizon. I felt lighter with every mile. The city had taken so much from me, but it had also given me the truth. I arrived at Blackwood Ranch just as the sun was setting over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of violet and gold. The air was clean, the silence was heavy and comforting. I walked into the house that my brother Bernie had built, and for the first time I felt truly at home. I was alone, but I was not lonely. I had cut the rot out of my life, and the wound was finally beginning to heal. But a man cannot live on silence and scenery alone. I had money now, I had power, and I had a lifetime of skills that were going to waste sitting on a porch. I looked at the vast expanse of land, at the empty barns, and the potential that lay dormant in the soil. I thought about Tyrell. I thought about how he had lacked direction, how he had lacked the pride that comes from building something with your own hands. I realized I could not save him, but maybe I could save others like him. I decided to build a legacy that was worth more than the gas beneath the ground. I used a portion of my royalties to establish the Hayes Center for Vocational Training right there on the ranch. It was not a charity. It was a boot camp for life. I recruited young men from the inner cities, boys who had been written off by society, boys who were heading down the same path as Tyrell. I brought them to Montana. I hired the best mechanics, logistics managers, and welders to teach them a trade. We turned the old barns into state-of-the-art workshops. The sound of birdsong was joined by the hum of engines, the strike of hammers, and the buzz of saws. It was the music of industry. It was the music of my life. I walked through the workshops every day. I saw young men with grease on their hands and focus in their eyes. They were learning how to repair diesel engines, how to manage supply chains, how to build structures that would last. I saw the pride on their faces when they fixed a broken tractor or welded a perfect seam. They called me Mr. Hayes. They treated me with a respect that Tyrell never had. I was hard on them. I demanded punctuality. I demanded excellence. I demanded honesty. I was creating the sons I wished I had raised. I was using my fortune to build men of character, men who knew that the only things you truly own are the things you earn. The Hayes Center became my heart. It was proof that I was not useless. It was proof that an old warehouse manager could still build an empire. Ideally, the story would end with a grand speech or a public accolade, but real peace is quiet. It was a Tuesday morning 3 years after I left Chicago. I sat on the wide wooden porch of the main house, a mug of black coffee steaming in my hand. The sun was just cresting the peaks, flooding the valley with a light so clear it hurt my eyes. Below me, the center was waking up. I could see the students walking toward the mess hall for breakfast, their breath misting in the cold air. They walked with purpose. They walked with dignity. My phone buzzed on the table beside me. The vibration rattled the spoon against the saucer. I looked at the screen. The caller ID displayed a number I recognized instantly. State Correctional Facility. It was Tyrell. He was eligible for parole soon. He had likely run out of appeals and excuses. Now he was calling the man he had tried to destroy. I stared at the phone. It buzzed again and again, persistent and desperate like a fly against a window pane. I thought about answering. I thought about hearing his voice begging for forgiveness, asking for money, asking for a place to stay. I thought about the boy I used to carry on my shoulders. Then I thought about the blood on the floor of my bedroom. I thought about the nursing home. I thought about the betrayal that went down to the bone. I did not feel anger. I did not feel hate. I felt nothing. He was a stranger to me now, a ghost from a life that belonged to someone else. I reached out and pressed the decline button. The buzzing stopped. The screen went dark. I picked up my coffee and took a sip. It was hot and bitter and perfect. I looked out at the horizon where the sky met the mountains. The world was vast and I had so much work left to do. I had a class to teach at 9. I had a meeting with the architects about expanding the dorms at noon. I had a life. I turned off the phone completely and set it back down. I smiled at the rising sun. The cancer was gone. The future was mine. And for the first time in 71 years, I was exactly where I was supposed to be. The greatest lesson I learned is that family is not defined by the blood in your veins, but by the loyalty in your heart. For decades, I believed that my value lay in how much I could endure and sacrifice for people who only saw me as a resource. But true dignity is knowing when to walk away from a table where respect is no longer being served. It took a devastating betrayal to open my eyes, but it gave me the clarity to build a life filled with purpose rather than obligation. It is never too late to demand what you deserve. Never let fear keep you in a place where you are merely tolerated, not celebrated. If you enjoyed this story of justice and redemption, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel for more. Let me know in the comments, have you ever had to cut toxic family members out of your life to find your own peace? I would love to hear your story.